Uh-oh.
The Turks are on top of it. Yes, there will be no delays.
Please, Mr. President, I am asking you to reconsider. No, begging. The Sector 7 Undercity is home to more than 50,000.
Director Twisty.
At least let us issue a warning, sir.
The stench of the director's cowardice fills the room yet again.
Breathe. Progress requires sacrifice. Learn to live with it.
Man. I'll be honest. When I first saw that,
Look at all these people.
Let's get this over.
Liam, I have definitely finished this. And I have a lot of input. I've just been very busy. One, getting platinum. Two, we had a episode of SEAL Team 7. I've been making content about it. I have lots of thoughts. Most of them I said on my episode of SEAL Team 7. The VOD will be up tomorrow. It's a 4-hour conversation. So, if you would like 4 hours of my thoughts,
You're up, Heidi.
I'll drop the link in the Soldier server.
Come on.
Hold the door.
Oh, here she is.
What floor? The basement. Advanced weaponry.
Going down. Doors closing.
Perfect. Just perfect.
Huh?
But oh, how the mighty are fallen. Wutai colluding with Avalanche and resorting to terrorism? I always thought the Wutaians an honorable people. They used to be, certainly. But now they're nothing but blood-sucking flies buzzing around Shinra's face. Would you not agree? In light of recent events, I mean.
I would. 100%.
Even the performance
What
that
a lovely smile.
they were able to convey through the facial animations of Yuffie, like the forced, gritting the teeth smile, fake smile, just really
I
phenomenal
think not.
for a non-pre-rendered
Foreign
scene.
visitors should take the scenic route and savor the opportunity to meet our latest autonomous weapons.
Damn it!
So this answers the question how they make it almost to
That
deep
was
ground.
Scarlet, director of advanced weaponry. It was one of her machines that killed Melfi.
Of course, this is
Calm down, Sonon.
Sonon's sister.
Calm down. Remember, we're here for a reason.
Right, boss. I'm sorry.
You do really nail the performance.
Don't
too.
be. I was ready to strangle her myself. And that's before she sent us off in the wrong direction.
Where did she send us?
Yeah, where did she send us?
Only one way to find out. Don't worry, we'll get to materia research eventually. Just a little longer, my
I love
precious.
this piano version of the Shinra theme. Scarlet's Trap. I have to do that at every bench because it's so cute. Hey, Phantom. I will be collecting more Vice Nero screenshots. Guys, just so you know, I will be playing with photo mode a little bit while doing this, just because, I mean, because there's photo mode now. So I hope that doesn't annoy you too much. Also, if I see a detail, I will, like, photo mode it. You don't have enough free camera to like, get game-breaking details, but not yet anyways. Like I said, I will be playing base game tomorrow, just to show you I was able to get this boy going. 3 minutes and 54 seconds, so 4 minutes. So it was, I'm sure somebody has obliterated that time, but this is just my first try. So it is a hard fight. I would, once you get the mechanics down, it's pretty doable. I will say that I had more trouble with this than I did with the original Top Secrets, but that is quite possibly because I ground myself to a pretty intense level before I even tried Top Secrets the first time. So, do you guys, okay, real quick, chat, I will get through the game, but would you like me to just do a quick run of Top Secrets and see how I do? No guarantees I'll win, there's some RNG involved. Quick chat poll. Ours, okay, that's 1 vote for ours. Ours holds a lot of votes too. There's 22 people in here, and ours is like worth 5. Okay. Along with Phantom? Yes, okay, alright. Okay, let's just do one Top Secrets run. No guarantee I'll win. I do have both Gotterdammerungs now. So we'll see if that changes anything.
Get your butt over here!
Got it!
Gotcha! Get lost! Goes the ninja! Gotcha! And the fury of the... I sentence you to a beating! Nice one!
Oof. Okay. I'm gonna try that again. Maybe 3 tries. You have to, so the trick that I found anyways, that the fight was not worth doing if you didn't pressure him by, before he starts his countdown.
Got your back. Don't let up now.
Now you don't. Take that! Twist my knee! Gotcha! Take this! Goes the ninja!
Uh-oh.
Put up a fight! They're going down!
You know, I thought Schrodingersbabyseal would make this part easier, but I forgot that one of your Yuki in particular uses or I used Gozu drive for her, which, along with the Chthonian, gave her the ability to gave her enough damage output that she could pressure quite easily.
Oof, gotta get cleaned up.
Get your butt over here!
Now Rama seems like the easier one, but Rama can kill you much quicker. It's just that you can also kill it much quicker too. Now,
Got it.
this I had the most trouble with initially, but I think this Schrodingersbabyseal might trivialize it. Maybe not. Maybe I spoke too soon. Maybe not. It does kind of seem to actually trivialize the fight. Well, there you go.
Well, can't fault him for trying.
Can't seem to sync the limit breaks though in this level. I think those are, it's certain battle specific that allows you to do a sync limit. All right, well, let's do this, I guess. I think I'm going to work it. I'm gonna level up some material while we're at it. Gonna attach a bad boy. No, it renders it useless for the moment.
Just Look at this place. Weapons here, weapons there, weapons everywhere. They're ready for some serious action.
Sounds like you ordered too.
Unlike my old man, I'm not some lazy drunk. I fight for what I believe in. Something he'd never understand.
Yeah.
Wonder how he's holding up.
Behind bars, you mean? Not well, if the government's got anything to say about it. Good on
Behind
him.
bars, you mean?
Jail's where he belongs.
That's my master you're talking about. Mind laying off him a little?
You know what? Let's drop it. Not exactly my favorite topic. It's only gonna make me mad. More importantly...
My god, you people are deadly boring.
So Goto's in jail.
Luckily, I know exactly how to liven things up. With a little experiment. Just don't go dying on me. That would yield very interesting results now, would it?
Unit calibration complete. Initiating combat data collection sequence.
That's it! The gloves are off! You're going down! Time to wreak some serious havoc! How you like this? With the power of his fire and the fury of his surging seas! Get lost! Not now! How you like this? You're mine,
Data collection complete. Recalibrating for next test. Unit calibration complete. Initiating combat data.
Yeah, and we will take a look at that prototype. Arsomni says, once Scarlet finishes a prototype that's 100 feet tall, might not be so easy even with Goder Damron. Yeah, I agree. But by that time, we should have all sorts of goodies at our disposal.
Recalibrating for next test.
What? There's more?
Unit calibration complete. Initiating combat data collection sequence.
You're gonna regret messing with me! Ready?
I'm on it.
Ready for a smackdown? How do you like this? I'm unstoppable! Not now! Wanna beg for mercy? You're mine, Papa! That's you! Not now! How do you like this?
Data collection complete.
Credit where credit is due. You exceeded my every expectation. And for me,
Okay. Alright. I thought there might be a good shot there. There wasn't.
you may now leave.
Why did I ever think for a second she'd be nice to us? She knows damn well it's gonna be a pain in the ass getting up there.
Well, yeah. Yeah, Yuffie. What do you expect?
Honestly, how do
Oh,
I
it's
do it?
Scarlet.
Now then, Sona, how you feel about giving me a boost?
Ecstatic. And go.
Okay, get to climbing.
Poor Ottoman.
Madam Director, the intruders are about to reach the research facility.
And we'll let them. Meanwhile, find out what it is they want. You do have eyes, don't you? Then you can see that while they are simpletons, they've made it further than any normal Wutaian ever could. Clearly they are ninjas. Teenage ninjas. And they've come such a long way. We simply must roll out the
Turtles
red
in a
carpet.
half shell. Turtle power.
My trusty steed should provide a fitting welcome, I think. Keep me apprised, would you?
Ma'am, cut system power to the research facility. Bar access to confidential data, then retrace their steps. Find out why they're here. Above all, do not let them out of your sight.
Sir!
Oh, Materia, where are you? Ta!
They're the world's most fearsome fighting team.
There you go. Hey, Ramagus, how are you?
Hey, how's it going?
So we've got Ramagus on the line with us because he's a member of the our Discord server, and if you happen to be a member of the Discord server, you're more than welcome to just hop in the voice channel and we can talk about it. So Ramagus, what have your thoughts been so far?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't been able to play the game myself, so I've just been living vicariously through you and Sleep Easy and Ray and anyone that can get some video posted. But yeah, actually, during the scene with Scarlet, I was also commenting on how good the voice or how good the facial animations were, and how well I think they fixed the facial animations, at least in the English VAs, because I remember them being a little bit off in Remake, but they seem really tight in this intergrade.
And I haven't gone through to look to see if they look a little cleaner in Remake, base game and intergrade, but I can tell you that if not, it's probably more of a sign of what's to come in part 2.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, Scarlet could just say so many things, and just those subtle facial animations. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
Initiating Mako energy saturation. Deploying security grid.
Now, this little, like progressive based, go here, press the button, then do this, then go up here. That kind of crawling through the level mechanic. Maybe just because of how much I played them, it got a little bit arduous and like particularly in the drum in Remake, it just felt like kind of a slog. But it seems to maintain like a very, very manageable pace in Intermission. So despite the length of the chapters, I actually feel like the chapters are infinitely more playable, and I hope that if they maintain the chapter-based structure, that they kind of keep the pacing in mind.
Yeah, I was going to say that seems to be a common, not complaint, but a common comment about the places where you do like some sort of platforming. I mean, you don't actually have a jump button, but in those areas, like when Yuffie's sliding across those rails or jumping on that hanger and doing a flip and stuff, it seemed much more snappy.
Yeah, it snaps. It's instant. It's just way less. Holding triangle to high five Aerith, like
yeah. Like that scene that you're doing right now.
Yeah.
Like it seems much more fluid, like it doesn't break up the action, while it seemed like in Remake, like they were trying to break up the action on purpose in order to load the rest of the screen.
Absolutely. There's a chance our boy might pop in.
there a list of changes, add-ons, Easter eggs, and integrated for the main game? I mean, so far, the only thing I'd noticed was what Sleep Easy had posted in his recent video. That they changed the lyrics to One Winged Angel in the opening.
And the syncing issue, but there are some other changes. There's some dialogue changes, particularly like Tifa's dress choice. It's no longer the exotic dress. And
what do they call it?
Something else I can't remember. Maybe somebody in chat can remember. My brain lost it, and I will be going through it tomorrow, looking for anything that I might notice that maybe somebody else didn't.
I personally was a bit confused about that one in the remake. So if they changed it to something like Eastern, that would make more sense for me. Because like exotic, I didn't know what that was describing. And so I chose it the first time because I didn't know what it was, and then it was like, oh, it wasn't what I thought it was.
Yeah.
Change mature, refined to match the voiced line.
Refined.
Oh.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, the voice line was always refined. So I was like, what? You know?
You're gonna get what's coming to you. And want to grow on.
Oh, I was watching Sector 6's video, and he made a really interesting observation about Roche. Now, the concept of Yuffie prior to them releasing even the OG was that she was supposed to be a ex-soldier mercenary,
right? And
following the group around throughout their adventures and stuff, and basically tracking down Cloud. And Sector 6 was saying, you know, that's basically like he was so when he came across Roche in Intergrade, he was like, that is what Roche is now. Roche is what Yuffie was supposed to be. So it was interesting seeing the juxtaposition of those two characters, because it's like they're the same character, but now they're different characters.
Very, very different evolutions. The way that they branched out, and one of the mechanics that they were originally going to do with Yuffie is that her class or specialty was going to be predicated upon which order you discovered these posters, these wanted posters, and different orders would essentially present you with a different character. They scrapped the idea. It was the same character but with like a different class set, you know, essentially. And you know, they obviously did scrap that idea, but one, I would have really liked a female soldier.
Yeah, that is interesting. We haven't seen that. We got female Turks, but we haven't seen any female soldiers.
I mean, other than I guess the Sviets, like Rosso and Shulk are the only they're deep ground soldiers, but there's no no soldiers that or reunion clones that aren't male. Which, hey, you know, I mean, kind of irritating to me, but
was there any reference to that in some of the like alternative media material, like a female like scientist being a clone or something like that?
Well, actually, so to my recollection, and I some of the, it's like they didn't actually say the gender, but in The Kids Are Alright, Caitlin Stark is the name of one of them. Because at this point, you know, by the time The Kids Are Alright was released, Nojima's had gone like full Game of Thrones. Like he really got into Game of Thrones. And I said this before on SEAL Team 7 that for all those that are
Game of Thrones the show or A Song of Ice and Fire the book series?
He started with the show. He hated the last season. but he did start reading Song of Ice and Fire, and I think he made it all the way. But you know, he named characters after in The Kids Are Alright after the Starks, and there is a like a reference to a reunion clone named Caitlin Stark, but it doesn't actually specify the gender. You just sort of assume based on the name, but probably shouldn't do that, especially with translation and all that stuff. I'm super stoked to see this guy. Like, this guy is just a huge version of what I just fought, and this is definitely going to be Proud Claude. I mean, this is going to be a serious fight, and I am here for it.
Yeah, so far that looks like it's bigger than anything that we've seen.
Yeah.
I mean, if you expand out to what it's going to be, if you know what Proud Claude is.
Yeah.
That's what I'm really hoping for, because Proud Claude was supposed to be this anti-weapon machinery.
Right.
I don't know. This is just me, and this is me just building stuff up. Don't really pay attention to this, but like, in my opinion, I would love if the weapons were like Shadow of the Colossus size.
Yeah, me too. I want it to be. I want the weapons to feel like the Titan fight in Final Fantasy 15.
Right.
Yeah, that's the part where you're like, oh, this game is great. Like, it hasn't let you down yet. And okay, so like I said, guys, I am one trophy away from platinum, and so I will spend a little bit of time on this stupid box game. But if it gets too frustrating,
Not long now, my precious. Sleep in my arms soon.
but Arzomnia in the chat brings up there's also Evan Townsend's mother, but I'm not really certain whether she's a clone or not. It's been too long since I last read that story. I don't know if I know she's definitely, was treated. But you're right, I'm not sure. Picturing the past actually sort of suggests something interesting, that reunion clones aren't just recipients of cells. And they're not just recipients of S cells. They're recipients of cells that have also experienced Mako poisoning, which seems pretty, interesting. There is an exception, though. And that exception, of course, is Red 13, who's technically numbered in that experiment. But I have a feeling they're going to clarify that in a way that's more cohesive to the whole reunion clone numbered experiments thing. Like, for instance, none of the numbered clones have Roman numerals. So
yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
I have a sense it's gonna be end up being a different experiment, and they might even dust off the old concept of Indigo 11 and Cobalt 12, the two other.
Yeah, I heard something about that.
I
was kind of disappointed not to see them.
Yeah, they're also whatever race of beings Red 13 is, but just they weren't red. They were the other colors. Okay, so I'm going to do this dumb thing. If anybody wants to hop in chat on Sleepeasy's server, feel free. Especially if you want to keep Ramugus company, because I'm going to just be doing my best not to rage out.
Really?
While I
turn this into
stupid box chat.
We're going to turn this into Ars Omnia Ramagus show.
Yeah, ready to help keep you company.
I love it. Ars! How you guys doing?
How's it going, man?
Well, yeah, I'm doing well. It's a little late in my time zone, so I was going to be conscientious of those sleeping in my household, but they'll be fine.
Yeah, just scream.
Scream to the ceiling. I had a thought about what you were just mentioning earlier in Chapter 1 when they go to get the IDs, and I think it's Nio who sees the clone. She looks at him and the first thing she says is Mako poisoning. So even if that idea isn't necessarily brought back as part of what makes a clone, the social perception around Midgar is that these clones are just ex-soldiers who all have Mako poisoning.
Yeah, and I mean, that's actually the most recent iteration of the story, like, because that was Picturing the Past, which came out with Remake. It was Nojima's most recent written work. Oh, I get a limit break? Oh, game changer.
Right on. This is going to be my next question, especially in regards to the clones, and specifically that word clone. That, when they say it's a Sephiroth clone, it's not really a clone, it's just a Sephiroth with cells in it. Like, they just use Sephiroth cells or Genova cells. I'm wondering if they're going to actually change that. And I was wondering if there have been any references specifically to clones in Remake so far.
That's a good point.
The term clone seems to be used more in effect to recreating Sephiroth's abilities and less to his physical appearance. Yeah. Although with the way they look almost desiccated and vampiric in a way, appearance does definitely seem to change as well.
Yeah, I'm wondering, well, especially with, the title Intergrade, with Nojima, making these specific biological references, I'm wondering if he's going to change that going forward. Being like, yeah, technically it's not a clone. We're going to have to find a different word to describe that. It was Sephiroth's experimental henchman.
Okay, I'm gonna go quiet, so talk amongst yourselves. Here, entertain my screen for me. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, no problem. You gotta concentrate. I totally get it.
Right. In fact, if we're talking, we might throw you off, but having that limit break may even make this worse. The disappointment's just all the more poignant. So, Romagus, when you first joined, you made a reference to the Turtles, and very specifically from the opening theme song to the 1987 cartoon, if memory serves right. Okay, so there are plenty of references to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in Intermission, but there might also be, and this is something of a stretch, mind you, but there might also be a reference to a secondary mutant group from that specific cartoon.
Bebop
there were
and Rocksteady?
Nope, not Bebop and Rocksteady. There were nearly, if memory serves, there were nearly 200 episodes of that cartoon. For those of you out there who have not seen it, I highly recommend it. 1987, fantastic series. But in a handful of those episodes, there is another group called the Punk Frogs. And do you remember them?
I don't.
I barely remember them. It's just when I saw that the Diabolic Creation, in particular, can turn Yuffie and Sonnen into frogs, and then with all the references, that I just remembered them, and so I went to look up their names and the name of that group. So I don't know whether that specific cartoon was the inspiration for all the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle references, but if it was, then that would be a secondary, deeper pool, just because of how infrequently those other characters actually appeared.
I remember back in the day, I had totally thought that Battletoads was a sort of offshoot of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles when I was a kid. And then I fell in love with that game. That game kicked me.
Is that specifically the game with the infamous sequence, either down a chute or along a side-scrolling portion on a vehicle? I think I know which one you're talking about. Or
it's
maybe
just
not.
It's just a super. Well, I mean, even Ninja Turtles
they were all
on the
difficult.
NES. It's really difficult. But yeah, I just remember having a really tough time with Battletoads. But I like the idea of because I mean, I guess later in that cartoon's history, they started just saying if there's an animal, let's make a human animal hybrid. That's what they call them. So you had Toka, he was a wolf, You had Razor, which was a snapping turtle. You had that bunny. Oh, and that's what I like, the bunny samurai guy. I forgot his name.
Yojimbo.
Yojimbo.
I think they called him Yojimbo.
Oh, right on. He's the guardian. That's awesome.
And then at least Toka and Razor were then used afterward, I think, for the movie Turtles 2.
Right. Yeah, they didn't. I don't think they were ever in the cartoon. I think it was a movie only thing.
Oh wait, no, there is another mutant turtle in the cartoon though. He's a little bit more feral. I think they called him Slasher.
Oh, that sounds familiar. Didn't he have like a black bandana?
Maybe. I think at one point he gets sent off into space. It's been a long time since I've seen it, mind you, but
yeah,
it's fun to think about.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, I was making jokes. The last time Baby Seal was playing through Chapter 2, I was making Gundam jokes when he was trying to defeat the armors in one of Scarlet's in front of one of Scarlet's chairs. Every time I see them now that there's a blue one and a red one, I just think of original Gundam, and I'm thinking Jarzaku and Rambaral's goof every time.
Totally.
And that blue one is vicious. Like, the red one's easy to stay away from, but the blue one... I'm bringing up bad memories for Baby Seal, I think.
He's focused. He's totally right now.
He is. Of all the trophies to have to go for last, this one seems the most innocuous, but it's, like he said, potentially rage-inducing.
My last trophy in Remake was the shitty dress.
I think mine was one of the dresses as well. I don't remember which one it was though.
Seems to be a lot of people's last.
Yeah,
because you think it'd be something like Top Secrets or something like that, but it's like people concentrated on that because they wanted to get the hard stuff out of the way, and they're like,
right,
we'll just do these. We'll just not do these side quests to get the other dresses.
But you know, there's someone out there. I don't know who, I don't know where, but there's someone out there who once again will have to get a box trophy to be the end, or to be the final trophy, because someone out there waited and waited and waited in order to go back to the kids in Sector 5 and do it a second time. Those kids, though, are going to rival Soldier one day. They were training with boxes before it was cool.
For sure.
There we go. Fits of Rage, turtle power. Let's see, what other old series can we potentially find references for here? Well, this one's not present at all, but with the size of the Proudclad prototype, I am convinced it is a Power Rangers Megazord, and that Scarlet will be the Red Ranger, Heidegger will be the Green Ranger. We need to find a few others.
That was another thing I was going to mention, actually, in the Weiss fight, right? Well, not in the Weiss fight, the Weiss introduction, right? Or Weiss, right? When he's talking to Chapman, Weiss changes colors. And I'm thinking that's a direct representation of Rosso, Azul, Shulk, and himself.
Oh, maybe since he can use their weapons in particular when he phase shifts. Yeah.
Right.
Access granted.
I actually.
But I also.
Go for it.
I was gonna say I also noticed that. Wondering if we're gonna have scenes specifically with the other chairman. I don't know what to call them. The chairman of the Shinra board, right? Because in Remake. Yeah, very similar. Because Remake, we had Heidegger, and he was in that sort of green hologram. And then specifically in Integrate, I noticed that we were talking a lot with Scarlet's hologram, and her hologram is red specifically. Now I'm wondering if we're gonna later on in the series have a sort of well, even in the OG, we actually have a boss fight with Palmer. So I'm wondering if we're gonna have like a similar sort of thing.
Actually, Palmer's the one I'm waiting for the most, honestly, just to see what ridiculous thing they do with Palmer next. It'll be fantastic.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, he's a refined gentleman. He's a refined gentleman. He knows how he likes his tea. He knows how he likes, how he likes his day. Actually, speaking of those holograms, Did it seem, maybe it was just my imagination, but did it seem to you in base Remake that when you're going through the museum, half the holograms are sunken into the floor and the other half are standing on top of the pad? I haven't checked, but I wonder whether that's been fixed, if it was even an error in the first place.
Yeah, that would be interesting to because I did notice that Remake. It seemed kind of odd. It doesn't seem to be, because I forgot which one. I think the only one that came across correctly was Hojo. Or was it Scarlet? I can't remember.
Oh.
But I did notice they all had their own symbols too. Like, company had given them like symbols and had associated them with colors. I wonder if they're gonna have that show up in some way later on down in the Remake series.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, each of those symbols creates the Shinra logo.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine some poor technician having to, install all those hologram pads and listen to the holograms over and over again to make certain everything has been tweaked to perfection, and just feeling downtrodden the more and more Hojo just belittles what's going on, just gives up on the rest of them.
Right.
Although I think one of them isn't even functioning properly. And if it's Scarlet's, and now we get Scarlet and hologram like 4 or 5 separate times in Intermission, that's just funny. It just had to wait a little bit longer to see her hologram.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do remember one not working. I remember there being a Palmer, a Hojo. I don't think there was I think Heidegger wasn't working.
Maybe it was Heidegger. Reva's the only one who takes it seriously.
Oh yeah, that's right, Reeve too.
But that's just Reeve. I do not envy you, Babyseal, for having to try this over and over again. But I mean, just think, when you finally figure out how to do this, there's another video right there. You're going to save people a lot of time.
Indeed. Oh, I finally watched Clark's victory over Vice. That's gotta be frustrating, especially in that third phase, because he's got that reject on. And you just feel like you're doing no damage to him the entire time. You just die.
It's a really fun fight to watch, though.
Yeah, totally.
I'm pretty convinced that the entire reason Intermission has added the symbol above or next to him, unblockable attacks, is just for Vice. I'm not even certain he has blockable attacks aside from his just regular sword swing.
I noticed that too. That was a very interesting addition.
I think it'll become a staple from now on, though, or at the very least something akin to it moving forward. Something to note that certain attacks...
It's definitely an improvement.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, a little bit of memorization here and there is fine, and certainly like knowing what certain moves will do is still something that we'll all have to memorize and learn to anticipate and appreciate moving forward. But just seeing that symbol before even reading the name of an attack already just does something where you know what's coming then. Not necessarily what specifically, but you still know something is coming that's different than a regular attack.
Indeed. I know in Final Fantasy XIV, a lot of the normal or easy boss fights, they'll put out that type of UI integration. They'll show you exactly where the AoEs go. And then when you try to do the hard mode version of it, they take away those signifiers because you're supposed to just learn it by then. So, yeah, I think
I'm going to do 3 more tries, by the way.
All right, man.
3 more tries.
But I thank you guys for all the conversation. That was very, very fascinating. So keep it up.
Thanks, man.
Hey, it's been great. It's been fun. All right, so 3 more tries. The absolute worst thing we can do is pretend to be Scotch and Koch and then just break down every single thing that he's about to do.
That was the first thing I was going to say. It's like, man, I should have wrote out a script and everything.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Coliseum.
I want to see one of those guys. I'm not sure if we'll get them, but they made quite an entrance, I would say. Left quite an impact on the in Remake, and they kind of weren't even really characters in OG, or barely, if even. But they definitely made their imprint.
Yeah, that's what one of the things I remember most about them from Final Fantasy VII itself is that they're basically non-existent, and I think it's Scotch, the one who wears green. If Cloud is chosen, then you don't even fight him. He presumably just lives, and maybe he takes over for the Dawn in Midgar. But in this one, in Remake, he is the one who disappears, and Scotch is the one chained to that table. Or at least he's bound to that table, so I don't know if they'll come back or not, but if they do, I wonder, I can't help but wonder whether they'll be in the Dawn's good graces, or whether we're going to find them in a much more interesting position. One of the things that I've joked about, although I'm also partly serious about it, is that certain very minor characters like them, they are so emotional, but in a fun way. Like they just draw you to them in a way. And other characters, although they are ridiculous, Beck's badasses, I find hilarious. Like, I want to listen to them no matter how silly they are. So what was the term from the stream earlier today? Crack pottery. My crack pottery theory. Right. I'm not even going to call it a theory. That's insulting to theories. What I want to see... Right, speculation, yeah. Honestly, even that feels disingenuous. But what I want to see for Beck's badasses, I want them to be outside of Midgar, and I want the party to keep running into them just like Johnny. I want them to be in charge of a group of devil rides. The enemy from 7, you know the one? I just want them to be a biker gang now. They couldn't be thugs, so they leave Midgar and just everything they do.
See, and that's what just depresses me so much about the ending, right? Is like Barrett teased me. Barrett was like, "It's gonna be an entire day before we get to call," and I was like, "Yes, yes! We're gonna have a whole chapter between Midgar and Calm, and it's gonna be long, and the game's gonna end on the frigate." Anyways, I was really hoping for some gameplay to occur between Midgar and Calm, and having like being able to experience that journey through the desert, and then they're like, check that game's it's like
there is still the possibility we'll get to see some of that. I mean, they weren't exactly dropped off at the gates. They were dropped off a ways away, so they could still potentially have to walk there.
Nice. God, so close.
So close.
Fitz, let me check what my targeting is set to. I changed it. I tried both, and I don't know if I changed it back to whichever one was working more, but this is my best score, but I'm very close. I feel it.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. That's all that means, is that you're right there. Yeah. You just gotta tighten it up a little more, and you'll get it.
It's just
thanks for the encouragement, guys.
It's just like when you were fighting Nero the other day. Like you were getting successively closer and closer. Just imagine these boxes with Nero's face and how much you wanted to just destroy him. Anything that will help get you over that hill.
I turned that stream off and just thought about how to actually approach Nero, and beat him so reprehensively the very next stream, or the very next fight, that I was like, what am I doing with my life?
Dude, that's how it happens, man. It's like you get to that point. I remember this happens all the time with me in 14. Where our group we'll be spending hours and hours just to get up to this, like to 1%, and then we'll wipe out 1% or whatever.
Oh.
And then once we get through it, right? It's almost like if we beat it once, it's like on farm at that point. It's like we have it down. We got it down to a science. And it's almost like it becomes like second nature. It's the second nature of the dance of a lot of these endgame boss fights in Final Fantasy 14. And that's just kind of how gaming is. I had the same sort of feelings back in the day with like Gran Turismo 2 and stuff like that, with time trials and license trials.
it's as though you find the secrets of the universe once you finally understand how to unlock that book and read it.
Indeed, you get into that Zen zone.
I'm not a 14 player, but I think the last experience I had with something comparable would have been the data fights from Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind.
Oh yeah, I like those fights. I mean, I hated them, but I also liked them. I just like the concept of them, you know.
A friend, my enemy.
Yeah, I wasn't certain how I felt about them specifically at first, because it was my fault too. I should not have played the Birth by Sleep, or PS4, the Birth by Sleep Final Mix version, because I was thinking of the mysterious figure the entire time from Birth by Sleep, and even the armors. And so when I saw that in Remind they had super armor, I just said to myself, why? That doesn't need to be a mechanic. There are other ways to make fights difficult. Looking back on it, no, it probably actually should be a mechanic, if only because Sora can accomplish so many other things with the tools at his disposal. But Ramagus, as for traveling to Calm, it's interesting that the party was led off at actually a literal crossroad, so there is still the possibility that we will get to walk down the road or walk up toward the Berg of Calm when Part 2 starts. I mean, Nomura did say that Part 2 would follow directly after Intermission, and I can't imagine any more literal interpretation than that, than picking up right on the side of the road heading up to Calm.
Perhaps. Yeah, I've heard that from Nomura. Or they could start in the flashback. Let's see, or maybe like a sort of like a little bit of both.
I actually hope we get to learn a lot more about Calm in general. Just 'cause it was something I was thinking about during the stream earlier, the SEAL Team 7 stream, is that before Midgar, in a pre-Midgar environment, Calm would have presumably been the most defensible and fortified location anywhere on the continent prior to the mines, prior to the Chocobo, getting over to the Chocobo Ranch, because it is a burg. It does have walls, and all the slums that would have been those original towns, like, there's no indication that there were any walls anywhere around. They were just open. So if there had been a crisis, or if people did have to travel, Calm may have been a very metropolitan area in a way, at least where travel is concerned. And that's certainly not what we see in 7, let alone after it was destroyed and rebuilt.
Indeed.
But I'd like to know a lot of that history. It doesn't necessarily exist, but the possibility that it could is always enticing.
For sure. Yeah, I'm always curious about, like, as in Final Fantasy VII, it's all cities. Actually, I'm not even sure if there's a better fantasy where there's actual countries with multiple cities in them that are part of the same nation, or anything even remotely recognizable as like a modern day nation with multiple different provinces or areas. It almost seems like, even in the MMOs, where you have the size and breadth in order to sort of have that idea, it's always city-states. And like, so if you go to this city, that is basically the country. And you go to this city, that's a country. You go to this city, that's a country. What was Calm? Was Calm its own city-state at some point? I mean, it does have quite a different architectural culture to it. But is that only because Midgar is so modern and it just never made its way to Calm? And Calm looks a lot like Nibelheim as well.
Certain parts of Midgar are definitely modern, but I'd really like to think those are the more recent additions and more recent construction projects. Something I really like in Remake is just seeing how wood is used in particular. So outside of Sector 5, you have what either was a mining town, or at least a mine that had a lot of buildings crop up around it. And those older buildings are principally made out of wood. The mine shaft, the scaffolding for the mine carts and everything, made out of wood. And then you'll find a lot of wooden communal places, like in Sector 7. Every building near 7th Heaven is dedicated to some different type of food stuff. There's frozen food, canned food, etc., etc., and they're all wood. And then you start to look at how metal was tacked onto them as they became more like slums, more like shanty towns, and began to build upward, or at the very least began to pile. And it's a lot more metal, it's a lot more detritus and refuse and whatever people can find. And then you get up to the plate, and there's virtually no wood outside of a few doors. And even then, some doors are metal, or sometimes you'll find a wooden table or two. But even then, once again, the tables look like they're metal. So
what about the suburban homes?
That's we'd have to go back and individually, of course, and look at them. And I think maybe there's some wood there, but there's definitely a lot of brick. There's a lot of brick up on the plate.
Right. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
These boxes are teasing you, Baby Seal.
You're gonna have to limit break those.
They know what you want, and they just won't give it to you.
And you can't limit break. They don't count as targets. I also feel like I have to be missing a box somewhere.
Time box.
You know, with the way Yuffie can throw her shuriken, whatever the technical name of that weapon is, this one in particular, I don't remember its name, but with the way she can throw it, I wonder if there's some cheeky game design here, and there are one or two of them up above you, in a place that you can only hit if you threw.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I haven't seen anything like that in here, but that would just be cool.
Speaking of
it doesn't look like it, actually. It doesn't look like it, but it was a thought.
Speaking of game mechanics, whenever you synergize with Sodon, I've noticed this one ability where they just keep constantly jumping the both of them. I don't know what it's called. I'm not sure if it's called a word or not.
The end of the ground combo for synergy it's broken in terms of like pressuring. And it was once I figured that out that it kind of trivialized the game.
That's the one where they jump up and then they jump up into the air and then thrust toward the ground, right, over and over and over again.
Yeah, that just screams Sid's jump. So everyone keeps saying that Sonon is a sort of animation stand-in for Sid.
Sid prototype.
Yeah, exactly. And when I saw that, I was like, that's so Sid right there.
It's very Dragon.
Also,
very Dragon
based off of that, if they're doing that, if they're creating these characters prior to introducing later characters, I am 100% convinced that the Rufus fight is a prototype for how Vincent's going to play. But we'll see. I think instead of Vincent shooting himself around the battle, instead of him shooting himself around the dashing, I think he's just gonna turn into the cape. He's just gonna teleport.
From Kill Team 7 earlier today, there was this fantastic portion of the conversation that dealt with Vincent's movement, and more specifically, just drawing parallels between Vincent's abilities and Nero's abilities. And the ability that Nero has that comes to mind that really, for me, sells that idea is Eldritch Celerity, which doesn't precisely mean, but basically means inhuman movement, speedy inhuman movement. So,
standing for red.
So thinking of what Vincent has done, especially in Advent Children, and even back from 7, just watching him float through the air, I think he'll still have those abilities, but they'll probably be sped up tremendously. He's always been able to defy physics in that eldritch way, in that non-human way, and now I think it'll be a lot more succinct. He will be at point A, and then he will be at point B.
Right.
And especially with things like Deadly Dodge and other movement-based materia and abilities, who knows what awesome thing he'll be able to do.
Indeed. And also with having the rest of the compilation being represented in the remake series, I'm wondering if they're gonna really focus, because OG, Vincent Valentine was this sub character. I mean, so much to the point that you could beat the game without even getting him, right? He was beloved by fans. So much to the point that they gave him his own Dirge of Cerberus. And in Dirge of Cerberus, they basically turned him into the entire world's savior. Like and it's weird being an OG fan and seeing Vincent basically take Cloud's role as like the de facto hero of the world. I'm wondering if they're like how they're going to balance that, because now these two characters are going to be kind of sharing the screen in a sense.
I think it's important for us to consider that, especially in the Remake series, every character seems to be earning at some point that moment in the spotlight. And there are going to just be certain times when one character is just going to be more important than another, and then we will, of course, go back to the story, whether it's exactly the same as we know it to be, or whether ultimately the changes build and build until it is a brand new story. And at Cosmo Canyon, I think, of course, Red will be the character who will be the focus. When we're in the prison, Barrett will be the one who's the focus. As we move forward toward Wutai, Yuffie in particular, possibly something with Avalanche as well, but Yuffie will be the one who will probably drive a good portion of that narrative forward when we reach Nibelheim. It could be Cloud, but I feel like it's going to be more Tifa this time around in particular, especially because we ultimately do still have Cloud needing to find himself, as it were, and that is really part of his central arc, if even that happens exactly as it had before, leading up to whatever ultimate clash with Sephiroth he's going to have. So, as for Vincent, whatever will ultimately be in store for Vincent will most likely put him in that position where he is the focus again, but I don't think it will be in such a way, or done in such a way, that ultimately overshadows what Cloud has to do.
Yeah, we'll see. Because it just seemed like that whole chaos. Because before in the OG, chaos just seemed like a really cool limit break. Then what they did for Dirge of Cerberus, they turned this really cool limit break into like this world-centered. The entire narrative of the story was based off of the proto-materia and Vincent's chaos form. I was, for me, I was like, I kind of blowing this a little out of proportion, but we'll see.
I mean, at the very least, where the Dirge of Story, where the Dirge of Cerberus storyline is concerned, at least, there do have to be other characters who seek it out. If people had left Vincent alone, if they hadn't come looking for that materia, then it would have been a very different story. And who knows, maybe that's exactly what it's going to be here, in such a way as to highlight that we know Vincent has this powerful materia in his chest. We know what chaos could potentially lead to, or what it might be, even if certain elements of that story are ultimately changed for Remake. But just because it's there doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be used or have the same importance or gravitas that it would have had, or maybe it will. Not knowing for me is one of the most exciting aspects of the entire Remake series.
Right, because if we get a proto-material and we get a chaos at that level, that suggests that we have an Omega. And I'm not sure if there has been any references to Omega yet. I don't think there have been any references to Zirconia yet. And supposedly, Zirconia has already done this deal so far in the story. You would think that would be kind of like at least a little bit of like a conversation going on, at least among the Turks or someone in town that mentioned it so far.
Most of the Turks are purportedly in hiding at the moment, so it may come up. I feel as though Sleepy's ears are burning at the moment. You've mentioned the correct trigger word. He knows. Whether he's here or not, he knows. yeah, throughout Remake, or even here in Intermission, I don't recall seeing anyone mention anything about an Omega reference specifically. But I mean, we are talking about something that's what, not even 96 hours old at this point yet.
Yeah, right. Hasn't been gone through with a fine-tooth comb just yet.
There's time.
Right. One thing I'm curious about, and when the party does come to home, there is that flashback. I was always wondering. So we understand that Cloud, at least in his initial Nibelheim flashback, saw himself as a soldier fighting along Sephiroth. I'm wondering if that could be interpreted two different ways. Okay? That Cloud fought along Sephiroth as, like, he actually fought the dragon, you know, that had interrupted the truck ride on the way to Nibelheim. Did he actually fight with Sephiroth, you know, as a Shinra guard, or did he watch Zack and Sephiroth fight the dragon and just sort of you know, vicariously lived through? Like, is he telling Zack's story unwittingly, or did he actually go in as a Shinra grunt?
That's a fun point. I like that. I bet they're gonna give us a little clue on that one.
Yeah.
Especially if the grunts in that scene, if we see the grunts, if the camera lingers on one of them, or if one of them is knocked away up against the side of the truck, and I don't remember from that scene in the original what, if anything, happens to the grunts, or if they're even seen after the truck stops, and Sephiroth and Zack, or, you know, Cloud, as he thinks, get out. What role do the grunts play in the original?
And as far as I know, there's the grunt. They're in the back of the truck with Sephiroth and Zack.
Yeah.
So there's Cloud, Sephiroth, Zack, and I think there's another grunt. But when it comes to the battle, it fades out, and then it fades back into the conversation and calm. Because after you beat the dragon, after Sephiroth beats the dragon, fades out, and then you're brought back to the present. And it's Cloud and the company in the hotel in Nibelheim, and they're basically talking about how powerful Sephiroth is. And I was just curious because if you go into the menu during that flashback, you can compare Cloud's level to Sephiroth's level. Sephiroth is level 50, and he has all this mastered materia. And Cloud is literally level 1.
And if you try to take any of it, you just get that nice dialogue box.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, the way Sephiroth's portrait looks, like, you feel like he's staring through you.
Correct. And so Cloud is level 1, but I'm wondering if that is supposed to be a representation of Zack's power level, quote unquote, in comparison to Sephiroth, or if that is Cloud's legitimate level in comparison to Sephiroth.
Alternatively, it could have been, since we've been talking about game mechanics as well, alternatively, it could have been a way for the player to see the difference between someone like Sephiroth and Cloud. Like, no matter what level your Cloud is prior to the flashback, you then, there we go, Blockstein, that's the one. But no matter what level your Cloud is, you are reverted to that level 1 state. Sephiroth is 50, and the difference between the two characters is manifest in everything. Cloud can't be hit. Cloud can barely do damage. His abilities are worse than subpar. So it could just be a visual representation of how strong Sephiroth should be considered. Since up until that point, we haven't, in the original, we haven't really seen anything aside from the wholesale slaughter in Shinra HQ. So to say that there is a soldier, his name is Sephiroth, he's very powerful, and we're not even at the point where the Zolom is impaled on that tree yet. So we need to see this idea somehow. that Sephiroth is a force to be reckoned with, or at the very least, he is worth telling the story about.
Well, in Remake, we've already got you see him from the Singularity basically throwing the Shinra building at the party in this Advent Children style boss fight. So, and there has been a lot of controversy over that. You know, because we have that whole scene, a lot of people are complaining that, you know, that Midgar's own scene is not going to have as much punch.
I suppose I could understand that viewpoint, but I still think it's going to have that punch, especially because we haven't seen the Zolom yet. If it is as monstrous as, you know, the prototypical world eater, the snake from mythology, as large as it should or could potentially be, Norse mythology not being something I'm you know, overly well versed in, but hey, you know what? That's why we have MJ Gallagher's book. I expect it to be large. I expect it to be bigger and much badder than the original. In the same way that I think earlier when you were mentioning the weapons, that the weapons probably are going to be as well. I'm just thinking back to that cutscene when they're flying out of the northern crater. You know, they're larger than the Highwind. And yet when we fight them, like when we're fighting the ultimate weapon in Medieval Forest, it's scaled down so we can actually fight it. But the implication there could and should potentially be so much different. And the Zolom is, in my estimation, the same way. I mean, just watching the model on the world map in the swamp dwarf the party, dwarf Cloud, dwarf the Chocobo. And then when we fight it, of course, it's scaled down as well. So I think it's going to be significantly
Thank you for the cheer, Fits of Rage.
Congrats.
It scared
there we
the
are.
shit out of me, too. I forgot that I had that alert.
I have your stream muted so I don't hear myself.
Yeah.
And just throw off everything I'm saying. I didn't even realize there was a sound. But yeah, I expect this Zolom to be significantly more threatening, and you know, in the Singularity, time, space, etc. It's all one. It's all compressed. It's all different abilities here and there, etc. But now we're outside of it, and all of a sudden those were-rats might actually be dangerous again. With starting off somewhere near Calm, or starting off even in Calm, going through a flashback, getting out of the city, you know, running to the Chocobo Ranch, whatever it's going to be, I think by that point we're not really going to be so hyper-focused on what Cloud and the party could do in the Singularity anymore, because it isn't so direct anymore. It's not what's happening in that moment.
Well, I was going to say that too, depending on when it's released, right? And the same thing happened in Final Fantasy XIV. I'm not going to make a direct translation, but real life time actually has an effect on narrative storytelling. You'll notice that if you read a book series from beginning to end, all in like almost one series, it feels like time went by really fast, right? But if you're reading a book series and it literally takes you a decade to get through it, like it sort of makes its way into your soul. You know what I mean? And so when you have this certain amount of time in between releases of games and you're foaming at the mouth for the next release, you feel that time. And the reason why I brought up Final Fantasy XIV is there are a lot of really big story elements that happen near the end of a lot of the game's expansions, like really big story elements, and then they're tied up in coming into the next expansion, right? Well, when you have 3 to 6 months in between the release of expansions, right, you're speculating, you're talking to the community about what can and cannot happen, or what you think will happen. How is this going to affect the game because this player, this major character died or whatever, right? and you have that weighing on your mind. Now, if you do another playthrough of the game and you go straight from the beginning all the way to the end, you don't have like those. And I think Clark had mentioned this in one of his streams. You got to give these moments room to breathe. Because if you don't give these very specific narrative moments their space, they tend not to hit as hard,
right,
as they should.
Oh yeah, I mean, just from as someone who deals with literature in particular a great deal, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I agree wholeheartedly. As for when the time does come and when we can finally sit down, and part 2 is not a fiction in our minds, but an actual legitimate experience, especially for those who don't necessarily stream it, don't necessarily have others with them at that time, but a very personalized experience. There, in regard to those moments, there's going to be that moment, especially if the Zolom can attack the party while you're trying to get through that swamp or escape it or something. There's going to be that moment where you have gotten out of the city, you have gotten to the ranch, you have taken damage, you have healed, you have done everything that you would do in a game of this nature, in a story of this nature, and then the Zolom is hunting you, potentially, or it just will one-shot the party or whatever it's going to be. And I think that the dread and gravitas of the monster will be able to sell it significantly, because we won't be in that singularity. It will be a monster to fear, if only because it can defeat us so easily. And at that point, the mindset isn't just on story, but also on mechanics. It's also on making certain that your health doesn't fall down too far. It's also on conserving your MP, and it's a lovely mix of things that creates something more than just as a narrative alone. As a narrative alone, we can just describe it, but having those extra elements, allowing one to actually play through it, does create a slightly different form of agency that I think will help settle that particular argument about whether or not, now having fought Sephiroth, the gravity is still there, that it'll be underwhelming or whatever it is that some people think. I just can't believe it. Not when there's so much that can be done in order to make that creature so present, so large, and so dangerous.
In short, the player is going to be comparing the Midgar Zolom to Mu, not the fight in the singularity.
At least in that moment when it's direct and present and what we actually have to deal with.
You have to take I was gonna say, because you have to take into account how much time is gonna go by before you even meet the Midgar Zolom. You're gonna have any possible, like you were saying, maybe there might be some gameplay elements before we walk into Calm, and then there's Calm, and then there's the Calm flashback, and then there is the walk from Calm to the Chocobo Ranch, and then and that's another thing too. I know back when I played the OG, I just skipped the Chocobo Ranch and I went straight into the swamp and got my ass kicked by the Midgar Zolom.
Yep.
and so when that happened, I was like, oh well, I got to find a different strategy. So that I went into the Chocobo Ranch to find that different strategy, and that strategy was to get a Chocobo to outrun the Zolom. Right,
to flee from it. To flee.
Then, exactly. And then when you got to the other side, and then you had that cutscene with the Zolom impaled on the stick, because I had that experience with the Zolom, that is what made that Zolom on not the stick, the tree, that much more powerful. Because I'd already had that experience. So I'm wondering if they're going to have to narratively have us confront the Zolom in some way or another, if they're going to try to make that scene hit. If we're going to have to confront the Zolom first and then find a different way to get around it.
Yeah, at least at the moment, I think we will have to, we will confront it narratively as part of the story, and then I think we'll have to flee. And if we get to come back and fight it later, either in hard mode exclusively or just at some point,
that
maybe
would
after
be great.
the chapter is completed, like that would be fantastic.
Forcing a scenario where your characters have to run away. Yeah.
Because certainly there is that choice in the original. You don't have to run away. I mean, you can use enemy skill to get beta and then turn beta on the monster that gave it to you. You can just, if you really felt dedicated, you could grind up to the point where you can fight it just with regular attacks, etc. But especially whether the next part is open world or large zones or whatever it's going to be, there is still that element of narrative. The story must be pushed forward as well, and I just can't see a situation per se in which we can just hang around whatever area we're in, whether it's outside of the swamp or in a swamp, and just grind up to the point where we can fight the monster and then move forward. Not this time around. It doesn't feel like it's what's going to happen. It could be exactly what happens. It just doesn't feel that way.
Well,
have we given up on the boxes? No,
he's probably going to the bathroom or something.
That is a poor way to put it. He has not given up on the boxes. All right.
Tactical retreat. Live to fight another day.
That's it, everybody. It's a tactical retreat. It's not giving up. Wutai has simply signed a ceasefire with the box. Yep. That's the story we're sticking with. Tell the reporter in the lobby.
What Remake has done over the original Final Fantasy VII, grinding doesn't make the game easier. Like, from what I've noticed with my normal play. Hey, no problem.
Hey. So
from what I've noticed with my normal
playthrough, we've decided that you haven't given up on the boxes. We've decided that you simply, as Wutai, signed a ceasefire with the boxes.
Yeah, I'm going to try the boxes a few more times. I just don't...
it really is a temporary ceasefire.
Yeah, very temporary.
This is a major accomplishment for you. Yep, sorry, go ahead.
What I've noticed with the mechanics of grinding that levels have no consequence on how you play the game whatsoever. You could probably beat hard mode on 35 if you were that good. If you're good enough, I think you could make it happen. Even on normal mode, that's what I've noticed is that I could probably grind to 50 on normal mode and not really make any progress. But what the developers had allowed instead was allow you to switch from normal mode to a classic mode or easy mode. I think by having that switch in there, that what the battle designers were basically saying, if you're having a tough time, just switch.
Yeah.
There's no point in grinding. They've gotten rid of the grind. It's not going to help you at all. What's going to help you more is just switching the difficulty level.
I do feel in part as though that is specifically for Remake or Part 1, the structure of where those fights are actually set up to be. Like Scrap Boulevard, for instance. If one is so inclined, if you're trying to complete all of Chadley's first battle intel prior to the end of Chapter 3, which is entirely possible, then you need to be able to stagger the were-rat. And the only way I've ever found to stagger the were-rat, the only way I've been able to do it, is by hitting a were-rat with a Lazara spell, without having done any prior damage to it. And at that point in the game, if you've started, well, especially on normal in particular, if you've just started from the beginning, you don't even receive the ice materia until you get to Chapter 3, until you get to Scrap Boulevard. Or you could, just buy it and then feel depressed a few minutes later when you actually find one. But in order to get Lazara, you need that AP. You need to run around Scrap Boulevard. Your characters do level up. So there is, if you're trying to figure out how to do things as early as possible, I could say potentially as efficiently as possible, but we should take time into consideration as well. There are some reasons to potentially do it, but overall I think you're right that with an understanding, an in-depth understanding of the mechanics, those levels, those stats you gain, are really more helpful for hard mode than I think they are for normal, and certainly not on the beginner difficulty. Yeah, unless you are trying to finish Chadley's missions as early as possible, up through Chapter 3, there isn't much of a reason to grind unless you just want to potentially start working on those weapons as early as possible as well.
Indeed. Oh, but that was another thing too. With all this Zack being by stuff going on, like, I'm pretty confident it's a new timeline. So I don't think the descriptions of Whisper, Rubrum, Viridi, and Portrayal were for nothing.
Right.
They specifically said timeline. So
in the Japanese,
even
too.
if I'm not, yeah. So it's like not even a translation issue. It's a timeline. However you want to interpret that timeline, that's fine. But it's still a timeline. Oh, with all this Zack stuff going on, right? Because I can't square with this. The Buster Sword. If Zack has the Buster Sword in the present time, how does Cloud have the Buster Sword in the present time? Right? And so I'm thinking, what hasn't actually been like nailed down yet is that maybe Cloud is Cloud. Cloud isn't confused. So I'm wondering if when we get to Nibelheim, if he's actually going to tell the truth the first time.
Oh, that he was he was a grunt.
Yeah, that he was a grunt and he was a shitter soldier, and that he we're gonna have some other explanation as to why Cloud is Cloud. And because if Zack's alive, then that's another. Like, I don't know how that can be alive and Cloud be having his PTSD, like, sort of persona change, adoption of Zack's personality.
Cloud seems pretty convinced that he used to be a soldier, at least throughout Remake. But as for whether or not Zack even needs to actually be dead, I'm going to make a comparison here that may not be the best, but I think it makes enough sense that you may understand where I'm going with it, especially if you happen to have children. Or if you don't have children, I think this is still a famous enough example that you'll understand it. When a child goes to a parent and says, "I can't sleep, there's a monster under my bed," it doesn't matter that there is no monster. What matters is that in the mind of the child, that monster exists. So even if Zack did not die, if Cloud thinks he died, the effect can potentially still be the exact same.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm not necessarily sold on any one particular theory. There's just at least one that there's one I think is kind of silly, but I'm not really sold on any one. And that's, for me, as I mentioned earlier, part of the fun.
The silly one. What's the silly one?
Yeah.
Oh, that he's in the live stream. I keep seeing people mention. I keep seeing people mention the white light, and like, yes, I've watched Advent Children even recently. I bought the new edition, but when you open a door and you walk through that door and then you look out of that door, it could potentially just be sunlight, or it could be that same white light we've seen. But it is silly to me. I don't think it's a poor theory. It's just not necessarily one I think I can get behind. But I do enjoy that there are so many different theories about it, because it is going to keep us talking. It is going to keep us talking regularly, or however long it takes for the next part to come out. But
For
it just
me,
seems like, well, it just seems like, especially with what we know about the live stream, where when your average person, non-Cetra, does perish, and then that person basically ceases to be that person anymore. No will whatsoever. I mean, Zack's an interesting case. He seems to be one of the few people throughout the compilation that can actually maintain himself. Of course, Aerith being a Cetra is one, but outside of him, outside of Zack. I think we've seen it with Angeal somewhat when he reaches down for Zack in Crisis Core. That seems to be indicative of a character who has agency yet. Sephiroth, but even Sephiroth has to jump through about 100 hoops to keep his own self intact in a way, and in fact it doesn't even work. He doesn't keep himself intact. So it just, with everything that happened with the singularity and whatever it is that Aerith does to it, and everything going on, there is something different about Zack. So I certainly won't say it's impossible. It's just not one that seems likely to me when we know a non-Cetra perishing ultimately does mean defusal into a much greater system where there is no one, there is only the ocean, as it were.
Not immediately.
Yeah, I guess we don't really have a statute of limitations on that. Yeah.
Elmira's husband. There would be no way to communicate with Aerith unless there was a time in between Elmira's husband's death and talking to Aerith.
She does tell him. She does tell Elmira that Elmira's husband traveled a great distance to say goodbye. I forgot about that line. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna quote, and this is one. No, I'm not gonna quote. I'm going to reference some basic, just sort of ghost story lore that comes from my particular background, and there's that entire concept. And I think Sephiroth represents this very, like, almost to a T. It's just that idea of the reason why ghosts exist is because they have unfinished business. And ghosts are real in the Final Fantasy VII universe. Ghosts are a thing. And they are understood to be former dead people. Right? That's how ghosts are formed in the Final Fantasy VII universe. And we have that entire train graveyard sequence that's ramming that home into our heads. Now, a lot of people say that the train graveyard sequence hurts pacing, and that they should have just completely skipped it. But I think in the broader form of the themes of Final Fantasy VII, specifically life and what happens after death, like that train graveyard scene that entire level is so much more important, I think, to the overall storyline of what Nomura and the developers are trying to tell with this grand narrative that is the Final Fantasy VII Remake series. So, like, I don't think that being a special Cetra, I think the only thing that being a Cetra does after death is allows you to choose whether or not you can permanently stay as your own. You could permanently not be diffused into the live stream, because I think it's a choice. Like, I think that was covered in either White Stream White or Black. I don't know. Clark can probably correct me on that.
I'm sorry, what are we talking about?
Whether or not, basically the mechanics behind diffusal into the live stream. Because
yeah, it's just about wanting to. Although, like, a lot of
that's
those
part of Geostigma too, right?
A lot of those mechanics come from Maiden, like, and we just sort of accept it as true,
The questionable one.
Yeah.
So what's the mechanic behind Geostigma?
It's Sephiroth's
from what I understand,
will.
Sephiroth's will.
Yeah.
Diffusing into the live stream.
Well, or not diffusing.
What about the whispers?
The whispers. I mean, we don't know the full gamut on the mechanic of the whispers, but it does appear to be that it's some kind of planetary function that has been corrupted by the time we're involved. By the time we see them. I mean, that's the concept.
I think wasn't Geostigma caused by people who were upset or disillusioned with the planet?
It affected people that were despaired, but On the Way to a Smile actually really clarifies that it's Sephiroth's will.
He's taking advantage of those in the live stream. They're refusing to diffuse into it because they're so angry at the planet, correct?
I don't think it was ever that complex. I think it was more just it's Sephiroth's will specifically using Genova cells to infect Lifestream.
Yeah, and then the more despaired someone feels, the more rapidly the disease.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we even want to call it a disease, I think it's Killmeister, Dr. Killmeister, who makes that determination.
Right.
Before
calm,
Rufus before Rufus deals with him. But I don't know. I can't say I'm sold on the idea. I still think it's a little silly.
I'm sorry. I forgot to finish what I was saying.
But even so, I want to hear you explain it because it's still interesting. Like nothing's off the table at the moment. Nothing's off the table, and there's nothing quite like that for a story that 24 years ago we all knew to the best of our ability. It's unprecedented. And
for me,
this time won't happen again. We have just these few years before it finishes, so all the talk now and the varying theories, no matter whether we agree with them or not, it's just unprecedented. It's fantastic.
At first I was like, no, I'm not into the whole timeline. We can't be 2 timelines. Because I had seen the ending where it showed Zack. I was one of the ones that were like, no, they just haven't showed him die yet. He walks a few more steps, then the Shinner shoulders kill him, right? I was one of those guys. But then I watched, I think it was Clark's video, and he was covering the info, or the
Ultimania info?
No, not the Ultimania info. The when you scan the Whisper, Rubrum, Viridian, and Cruccio, and where they specifically mention timeline, and I was like, well, that blows that out of the water. I mean, that's literally text in game saying that timelines exist.
Mm-hmm.
So I was still holding on to this idea that it's a post life thing. Like that Zack is dead. That doesn't necessarily. But at first, I thought that they were mutually exclusive. Zack is either dead or Zack is in a different timeline. I've come so far where I'm at, and I think this is what's angering people the most, and it's because they haven't been able to find a way to reconcile that. Is that they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. Zack can be dead. Schrodinger's Zack right here. Zack can be dead and alive at the same time.
Before he opens those church doors, is he alive or dead?
Right.
Inside the church, they don't know.
There we go.
No,
yes and no.
For me, it's different timelines and life after the death experience. For Zack, when Zack dies in Crisis Core, he sees a winged figure coming down. He says, I want them too. Right? What better story than for SE to show us how Zack gets his wings? And how does an angel get their wings? The angel gets their wings by people, guiding people.
And because we
Zack opens those doors and he says all those mourners, I mean, that's his opportunity to be the man he's always wanted to be.
The hero.
He is this hero, and he's going to do that in the afterlife, in this separate timeline. He's going to continue to show his hero, like he's born to be a hero. And I think
it is a poignant story. Yeah, what you've described would make for an absolutely poignant story. And of course, if we consider Advent Children, he is still hanging around to the point where when Cloud has to face Sephiroth, Zack comes to him and asks, "Do you need help with this?"
You need help.
Yeah, and Cloud says, "Nope, I've got this." But he still makes the offer. As for just time travel or time in general, it's not as though, as a concept, regardless of which type of time travel or how it's going to be explored, etc., etc. It's not as though time travel is new to the Final Fantasy series. The original Final Fantasy, the original Final Fantasy is predicated upon the idea of going back in time to defeat the final boss, or the first boss, or just yes. I mean, it's in Final Fantasy, it's in 2, it's in 5, it's most certainly in 8, it's in 9 a little bit. And of course, there's also 13.2 specifically, but time travel is not a new concept. And if this is just Final Fantasy VII's turn to employ it, then we cannot say it is unprecedented. Not for the series. For the compilation, sure, but not for the series.
Thanks for the shout out, Piper.
Schrodinger's, yes, that would be fantastic. Schrodinger's,
and 14 does as well. And 14 actually did it really well. It's not time travel that affects the story. It's time travel that shows you how the story went down after the fact. It's because you time travel.
I'm admittedly not a 14 player, so I've appreciated your explanations. Otherwise, I would have no idea what you're referencing in any capacity.
Oh, it would be a lot more complicated than but all in all, yeah, I think that's one of the things. I think, I mean, I can understand why people are pissed. People get upset that it's turning into a time travel story. Because time travel wasn't a major theme in the first one, right? But when you're dealing with the concept of death, specifically a loved one's death, I mean, irrevocably, the idea of traveling in time entrenched in your head. If you've ever had a tragedy in your life, that's the first thing where your mind goes. Right?
Would you like the example?
Yeah, it's part of it. It's part of the what do you call it? The five stages of acceptance, or 8 stages of acceptance. Is one of them denial?
Right, or is it called the 5? Is it still called the 5 stages of grief, or is there a name technically?
I'm not sure exactly, but one of them is denial, right? That this didn't happen. This isn't actually happening anymore.
I will give you. I don't know if it's exactly what you're looking for, but I'll give you what I will call the perfect example of that, since it's a personal one. When my father died, I was in grad school at the time. And for a few months after that, I reacted as one normally would. I had a fine relationship with my father, etc., so there was that emotion. But when it really hit me was one night during an evening course. I was asked a question by a friend of mine in the class, and it was during a class presentation of all things. And
how close? So close.
Oh, nice. Congratulations, Baby Steel. Congratulations.
Jesus, that was
Platinum achieved.
Thank you for the tips, Vidra.
So good. I feel so bad, Ars, because that was such a that's a really deep story, and then that happened right now.
Well, it's so quite alright. This is really entertaining. People don't need to hear that story. It's not exactly. Well, it's not a happy one. To make a long story short, during the presentation, I was asked a question by a friend, and I didn't know the answer, but my immediate response was, "That's an excellent question. I don't know, but I bet my dad does. I'll ask him." I didn't even think about it. And then it dawned on me, oh wait, my dad's been dead for 4 months, or 3 months.
Yeah, dude.
That, I think, is an example of fits of rage, dropping the victory bits. Hey.
Nice.
I'm so sorry for interrupting a very deep story.
It's quite all right. It is quite all right. We were all. I've been staring intently at your progress here. It was bound to happen. So, but I think, at least from a personal perspective, for me, I can understand what you're saying because I did have that experience. The key, from a storytelling perspective, is and this, I do not envy them this task, is if they're going to do something like that with Zack, if they're going to create a story with Zack in that way, they have to find a way to make people feel something comparable, even if they've never experienced it. And that will truly be if they can do it, truly be indicative of the skill of the storyteller.
Sure.
Yeah, this is where I have to admit my bias, right? And this is where I think I put too much emotional weight into the story, just because of the story's themes. Is because I've had a similar tragedy in my family as well, and it was my brother.
Man, I'm glad you're here.
Likewise.
I have my own experiences with death and how to treat it, and with the concept of an afterlife. Right now, I'm not a religious man, but there are certain things that have happened in my life that I cannot explain, and then there are other things that I can. And then specifically, what's interesting is when I think back of how this concept of ghosts even made its way into the human phenomenon. Because it's not just a Western thing. There are several different cultures across the world that have this understanding or have this concept of what happens to a dead loved one. And what I was referencing earlier was, part of that becomes a part of our cultural understanding. So, like, for example, the idea of the reason why ghosts exist is because they still have unfinished business in the mortal world. Now, for me, I think another explanation, and this ties into, I think it was a Native American interpretation of why you should never talk of the dead, is because if you keep the dead on your mind all the time, you will be visited by them in your dreams. And if you're a culture that hasn't separated dreams from reality, right? So if you think that dreams are just another form of reality, or another reality that you step into when you go to sleep at night, that would make sense of how that's basically a ghost story. Now, from a psychological standpoint, when my brother died, he was constantly on my mind. I took days off of work. I was with my family, and that's all. We were all just around each other, and we kind of didn't really talk to each other. We just fell to silence around each other, and it was just like we were constantly meditating on because it wasn't like he had cancer and like we saw it coming. It was a very sudden thing. It was an accident, right? So you have this memory of this loved one, and it's ripped from you, and it's weighing on your mind, which is very similar to what happens with Cloud and with Yuffie here in Intergrade with the death of Sonnen. Like no one's. I don't want to say no one saw the death of Sonnen happening, because everyone saw that. But we can say for sure that Yuffie didn't see it coming.
We weren't necessarily certain it was going to happen. I myself was one of the people who said, I'm not wholly convinced, if only because it's so obvious that it's too obvious.
Right. It felt like kind of a setup.
Yeah. Right. And then, of course, with the way Nero just, I don't know, collects his body in the same way that you would pin an insect to a tack board or something. I don't even.
Yeah, by Nero's the face.
Right.
Yeah.
Nero's macabre puppet show. But you were saying, I guess you were saying.
Oh, yeah. So I would have dreams about him.
Yeah.
Right? And in retrospect, and again, because I'm not a religious person, I rationalize that as, he's constantly on my mind.
Right.
Of course, I'm gonna have him in my dreams. But what felt weird, right, and was what happened. And I know this isn't a thing that just happened to me, right? This is a similar concept that happens to other people who have felt tragedy. Is that person will appear in their dream, and then they'll also make up a story in their dream of how they're not dead. And that's what my brother did for me in my dream. And what's weird is while I was dreaming it, I think this is similar with like DMT trips, right? Is that you think you're in your dream, you think you're talking to somebody else.
Yeah.
But again, as a religious person, as a rationally minded person, I know that all of that has been stored in my brain. Everything I know about my brother has been stored in my brain. But what's interesting is that it was such a convincing deception that I really, really thought he was still alive. My brain had convinced me in the dream.
Right.
My brother had created this elaborate plan to evade the United States government, and that he just wanted to go live on his own and not to contact him.
He was off grid somewhere.
Exactly. He went off grid, right?
Yeah.
And then I woke up, and for like 5 seconds, I felt feeling that I hadn't felt for the past 3 days, but that was the relief that my brother wasn't dead. And then I realized, wait, no, I didn't wake up in my house, right? Because I was at my other brother's house. And so that's what reminded me, right? Because I woke up in somebody else's house and I was like, why am I here? Then as soon as I answered that question, oh, I'm here because I took time off work because my brother's dead. And then it just brought me right back to, oh, he's dead. He's gone.
Yeah.
You know, so,
now,
long story short.
I hate to ask this real quick before you move on. When did your brother die? Was that early last year?
No. This was a long time ago. This was 2007.
Okay.
It was during a formative part of my I wouldn't say youth, but young adult life.
Mm.
If you want me to completely skew the conversation, I can say that's the year I graduated from high school.
Oh.
Oof.
Oof. I was 23 at the time. So
I'm sorry, Baby Seal.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Baby Seal.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
So yeah, and that's another thing too, is I've had years, I've had over a decade to sort of internalize that event in my life, which I'm sure you too as well. I mean, how long ago was it for you, Ars? You said it was during graduate school?
It was when I was in graduate school, so let me think for a moment. It's been about 7 years now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you've had some time for it to sort of like weigh on you.
Which is why I can specifically tell you that whether the event in question is sudden or whether it's something you have seen coming for potentially years, like in the case of my father who, wasted away from congestive heart failure effectively, it doesn't actually matter. It can, the shock of something sudden, I'm sure, is that I do not understand, right? Because that has not been something I've experienced. But what you've described still sounds mighty similar.
Yeah, grief is very complex, and it isn't always generalizable. But it's one of those things that it's almost a language. It's almost this emotional language that specifically resonates with people that have felt it. Like, even though I may have experienced grief differently than either of you, it's very easy to resonate with grief discussion. It's fascinating. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with terror management theory. And thank you for all the subscriptions I'm getting right now. Thank you so much. I'm not getting any notifications from that, so I'm really sorry, whoever it is.
You do have a cute little zombie dancing across the screen.
I did have zombie dances, but
yeah.
Whoever you guys are, I love you. The terror management theory is it's a mimetic, it's sort of a mimetic, we'll say, it's the social component or the social offspring of internalized grief in the way that affects social growth, the way that influences culture. It's often used as the primary explanation for why religion even exists, and it's that so much of our personality, every element of us, is built on this fear of death, and so we subconsciously create all this stuff, and it infects all the little parts of our society and stuff like that. But It certainly it affects dreams. In particular, like it's crazy how powerful the brain is. I mean, like just when you dream and you can make yourself unaware of the fact that you're dreaming, like your brain is informing you that you are somewhere you're not. Like your brain is a VR simulator. When you really stop to think about that, it makes you question the entirety of your reality. There's no way I can prove to you, ours, that I am not a figment of your imagination right now, because your brain is powerful enough to create a consistent level of illusion and to withhold certain pieces of information and perspective from you, from within your brain. Like, that's insane, And so when you apply things like grief and these powerful emotions into dreams, the things that happen can be incredible, and not to get too crazy or anything, but our good friend Final Fantasy Peasant, one of the things that he did when he went to Peru for his ayahuasca trips is it was he confided to me that a lot of that was kind of grief centric, and he ultimately said it was very useful for him. So I'm not saying go do that, but I am saying that it was useful for him.
I enjoy cold weather. I don't think I'm quite built for the southern hemisphere.
Well, I know this was a very long roundabout way to get to that point, but Clark had basically summed up what I think is going on in the depictions of Zaka that we've seen so far. The brain is a very powerful thing. Mm-hmm. There are other certain cultural norms that we're aware of, right? So ghosts can exist because they still have unfinished business in the mortal world. And another concept is the life flashing before your eyes when you have a near-death experience. And mix that with what Clark was just recognizing is the mind being so powerful in order to give you these sort of illusions, to the point that you don't understand that you're not in reality. Right. Zach could, and this is where I'm saying is like it could be a different timeline. It could be that Zach is dead, and that those two things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. I think if you've ever seen the movie Jacob's Ladder, basically the entire premise of the movie. I'm sorry if you haven't seen it. I just spoiled it for you.
It's all right.
What happens is in Jacob's Ladder, it opens with this scene that started Tim Robbins. And it starts with this opening scene of Tim Robbins being helicopter lifted out of a battle scene in Vietnam. And then the next time we see him, he's a postal worker, I think, somewhere in New York. And it's him living his life as a Vietnam vet and trying to reintegrate himself into society. So we think, if you're a person watching that movie, you're thinking that that's what the movie is. It's about a Vietnam vet reintegrating himself into society and the difficulties that he has to do in order to do that. Because we have that story as well. A lot of that's one of the biggest things that soldiers have to overcome when coming back from battle is reintegrating themselves into the society that sent them off to war.
And that is definitely a theme.
Excuse me? You mean to say that
of Final Fantasy VII.
All this trouble for materia?
And not just soldiers coming home and being unintentionally complicit in the evils of a greater corporate or governmental structure. Like Zach is a great example of that, as being like just this purely innocent, completely a completely pure like model of goodness, like a archetypal goodness, but just unwittingly aiding and abetting pure atrocity. Not just that element, but mental health. I mean, especially around Cloud. Cloud is highly representative of, like trauma and the way trauma affects people, the way people respond to trauma, and it even allows a little bit of redemption for standard people who often don't feel comfortable where they're at in life and make up stories to not. And that's a coping mechanism for a variety of mental health issues. There is a book coming out called The Psychology of Final Fantasy that or it may already be out, but I've been meaning to get in Mo's been trying to get me in contact with the author because I do eventually want to get him on. But psychology is a huge theme of Final Fantasy VII. You cannot rule it out as either a theme or as a potential explanation for what we're seeing. I mean, there's timeline stuff, there's deception. These are all things that could potentially explain.
Does this sound familiar to you, Babyseal? The Psychology of Final Fantasy Surpassing the Limit Break?
Yeah, that's it.
So far as
August 31st of 2020.
Oh, it's the last year.
Oh, wow, that's very recent.
Would you like me to paste a link in chat?
Yeah, go ahead and put it in the chat.
Yeah, so in Jacob Flat, basically. So as the audience viewing it for the first time, you're thinking that this is a story about a vet reintegrating himself in society. Well, as the story goes on, it's everything seems very real. Everything seems very grounded. Right? But then there's this things start getting a little weirder and weirder, and then he starts meeting. There ends up being like this sort of like conspiracy, right? And he starts talking to his old war buddies and getting them all together. And they're all getting together because they think that the government had done something to them because weird things start happening to them, and he's thinking that they're government agents, right?
Comparable to the Manchurian Candidate. I haven't seen the movie, so I'm trying to make a comparison myself.
Right, very similar, right? They think that that the government was doing some weird sort of experimentation on them while they were off in Vietnam, and they're trying to get to the bottom of it. So then it goes from this reintegration story that's very grounded into this conspiratorial sort of suspense film. Then there's this scene where he goes and he dances with this woman in a nightclub, and the woman turns into like this like demon, and everybody else, and you got this strobe light going off, and then everyone else in the nightclub is turning into these like hellish sort of like demons. It's very frightening. So then it turns into a horror film, right? And then he wakes up the next morning in his bed, and he gets up and he walks out of his bedroom door, and there's his dead son sitting in front of a staircase, and he's relieved to see him, but it doesn't make sense, right? And so you as the audience, you're like, what is going on? What? I was just watching this vet film that turned into a suspense film, that turned into a horror movie, and now I'm seeing his dead son in front of him. And then no words are said. He just walks up to his son, and his son grabs his hand, and they walk up the staircase together. Then the screen fades to white, then it fades out from white. It goes back to the Vietnam scene. You're seeing this doctor note down the time of death, and he pulls the blanket over Tim Robbins' face.
That feels like the kind of film that works very well once, very well twice, like The Usual Suspects, and then after that, it's just enjoyed for what it is.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, so that has been at the core of what I think is good. If they're trying to make sure that this Zack stuff doesn't fall flat, because you've got these people that it's like, oh, it's a different timeline, and you have people that hate the idea of a different timeline. And then you have like, oh, well, it's this death thing. You have these people that prefer the timeline over the death thing. Like, I think that it's the thing that Zack is experiencing is this either post-life or in-between limbo state before he accepts, before he is doing something.
while I still can't necessarily say I believe that is what's going on, if it is ultimately what is happening, if it's even remotely comparable to that, I think the emotional payoff will be fantastic, honestly. That explanation alone makes the idea of what could be for the character very enticing. Very enticing.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I regret to say that in my own field there isn't anything exactly quite that in depth. Although after a fashion, I do deal with the power of emotion and the power of how the mind, as powerful as it is, it can trick people. I think is probably, for my purposes, a better word to use. Can trick people in more subtle ways. In particular, when I am teaching rhetoric, and I'm discussing the power of emotional writing, or potentially the complete and utter failure of emotional writing, if one cannot connect to an audience or find the connections and back to the material. That is a very powerful part of the conversation. But even in far more subtle ways, one of the things I like to do talking about context or lecturing about context is draw a series of hash marks, little lines, segments on a whiteboard, and ask my students to tell me what it is I have drawn. And more often than not, they will tell me they see a triangle. Because, of course, that's the general outline of what I draw. But there is no triangle. They fill in the blanks, and that is context. That is, at least as I'm explaining to them, those blanks are what a reader is going to do if writing is not contextually appropriate. Those blanks will be filled in. And it's really different than reading over a paragraph and reading over it again and again and again, and always seeing the word of in your first sentence, in your first paragraph, and then you hand that paper or that writing to a friend, a family member, ask that person to read over it for you, and the first thing that person then tells you is you realize you've missed a word in your first sentence, and you're boggled because you've seen it. So you're certainly not quite on the level as what either of you have mentioned, but related, I'd like to think, in some minor way.
Well, I was going to say, that's Hironobu Sakaguchi's version of negative space.
That's a good.
Negative space
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, in negative space, and what I like about that too, it's you represented across art. I was taught about negative space in high school. And my art teacher was saying, that's why you have to fill the canvas. Your job, you've got this canvas, and what a lot of amateur artists do is they draw a small little picture in the center of the canvas, but they've got so much white space. And she was like, what you have to do is you have to be able, like, when your first job is to fill that entire space. You got to get used to filling that entire space. So she got us used to filling the entire canvas, making sure there was no white on the canvas. Then, afterward, she taught us about negative space and how you can utilize negative space to create, for example, an incredibly bright sun. You know, so like if you're painting a scene, you're trying to paint the sun. You know, a lot of kids, when they're young, they'll just grab a yellow crayon, draw a circle. As you develop this talent and understand better, actually the best way to represent the sun is to contrast the sun with the colors around it. And so if you're able to paint colors around a white space, it will give the illusion of the sun shining on whatever subject you're painting. So it's useful in painting, it's useful in writing. And here's another example. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Samuel Barber, but Adagio for Strings. Have any of you ever heard that song? What I'm talking about?
No.
I'm not
I'm familiar with the word Adagio, but
Okay,
Yeah.
so
As a musical term, but I'm unfamiliar with the
I mean,
figure or the song.
one of Samuel Barber's. He's an American classical orchestrator. One of his most famous songs is Adagio. He also has an Adagio for choir, but it's basically this song that slowly builds up into the course of 2 hours. And it comes to this tremendous crescendo, and then it's silent. And what's interesting is it's that concept again of negative space. You're listening to this song the entire time, and you're building up to this crescendo, and then the crescendo happens, and you think it's over, but it's not. And it just sort of like, instead of ending on a high note, it ends on this very somber melody. But so what's interesting about that is that what it did is the thing about that song that always sits with everybody is not the actual crescendo. It's not the pinnacle of the song. That isn't the most amazing part. It's not the part that people take away. And people don't take away the beginning, and people don't take away the end either. They it's that moment of silence, exactly. Right? It's like no one can play.
It's deafening.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, I've never heard it, but I know exactly. I think what you're talking about in that regard.
Right. Yep. And it's like it does so much to a person that, like, that it's like the silence is deafening. It's something that's not there, right? Because it's what it's representing. It's representing the absence of sound.
Right. It's when any absence is used artistically. And
correct. Yeah.
Or it's abstraction.
Yeah.
Where are we?
The abstraction. So that's what's beautiful about that metaphor is that the triangle, quote unquote, that you draw with the 3 dashes is supposed to give people this realization that there's this negative space, and also, that exists also.
We both know you're afraid of us.
Like we have to. What was the world like before they had the concept of zero?
You should know there's
we
more
use zero as a way to measure things.
See him coming. Just imagine
like even in
the
concept of having a control in an experiment, right? The idea is that the control in this case is the sort of 0 point, and any differences that we see are in comparison to this sort of 0 or neutral point. Acids and bases. Neutral. 0 would be
designed by yours truly.
Base, but the idea is the same. Right?
This will be a memory to cherish for the rest of your lives. All 36.
You have this comparison. You have this thing. Before, and if you go to Athens, you go back to a more mythological era, they didn't know that wind. It's like I think it was David Foster. I think in one of his speeches talked about, what was it? There's 2 fish talking to each other, and one of them mentioned something about water, and the other one doesn't know because a fish lives in water and don't understand that water is a thing that they move. And humans for the longest time didn't understand that air is a thing that they move. It's invisible to them. They don't see it. It wasn't until people were able to prove, and part of that proof was wind, right? That wind is such a and right now, the closest thing we have is the vacuum of space. Right? We think that there's nothing in space. There actually is something there. I don't know how that Sorry for the tangent.
I mean,
I just wanted to compliment
I'll try and link it back in a roundabout way. So the closest thing, being most definitely not of your field and aiming to try to create, in my mind, ways to connect. What I was reminded of is the preface to a speech, a literary speech, an academic speech that J.R.R. Tolkien gave in, I believe, either the late 20s or early 30s. It was the preface to a very seminal piece titled Beowulf, the Monsters and Myths, if you're familiar with it. And at the beginning of that speech, that conference speech he gave that drew into the paper, he tells a story. And I can't remember the story verbatim, but it's effectively about a man who built a tower and died. His son inherited the land and had the tower torn down. And the whole point Tolkien was ultimately making is that no one ever thought, no one ever realized that the reason the deceased man had built it in the first place was to climb up to the top of it, look out, and see the ocean. And what he was effectively trying to communicate is that Beowulf had been, for so long at that point, considered a historical document rather than a piece of poetry. And effectively, it was his roundabout way of saying people couldn't see the forest through the trees. When I'm thinking of, as you've been describing things, in the concept of negative space and the ability to paint a larger picture, if we're going to go back to your canvas for a moment, paint a larger picture, then that does come to mind at least. And at least through Tolkien we can see certain mythological characteristics that might lead us back to Final Fantasy, such as, Fafnir, or other Nordic-inspired things that he may have been interested in. So there we go, that's the closest, or the most clean, efficient way, if it even can be called that, I can get us back to Final Fantasy.
Right on. Okay, I could say some more on Final Fantasy.
Well, at least while you're thinking of that, I will let you know, I really, jumping back to maybe, 20 minutes ago or so, I really enjoyed the train graveyard sequence.
That's what I was going to say, yeah. Continue, ours.
Well, just for me, the train graveyard, it exists. It existed in 1997, it exists now. But there is that element of context, of creation. I know it exists, but I want to see what else it could potentially be. I want to see the rest of the graveyard that has presumably always been there, but that we didn't get to see. So the segments of Remake that took us to places that were either virtually non-existent in the original, or that were implied, such as the sewer system, in a much grander context than we originally went through it way back when. I really enjoyed those places, and I hope that moving forward there are other places like it. I do not consider them to be fluff or filler, or what's the term that people have been using, especially about the sewers. Some people really dislike going back to the sewers. Padding, thank you. I really don't consider them padding, especially if we get to learn something new. And from my perspective, simply learning what a place is like within the world, within the universe of 7, is knowledge well gained. And if I need to slay Abzu for a third time, then why not? I mean, at some point, that thing just needs to die because
Yeah, I think that's one of the issues with when you have such a lore-intensive, story-intensive video game. You've got the people that love the story, and anything that gives them more story, they eat up. And then you have people that love the mechanics, and that's the thing. It is people who love mechanics, I would say. I'm one, and I love mechanics, but I could see where they're coming from because they feel like they've already been here. They're just retreading the same mechanics.
It's what they like. Nothing new is added in those places. It's all slowed down.
Correct. All right. But what I was going to say is, the criticisms, right, of their Zack being dead, or Zack and this being like, because Zack's not dead, quote unquote, that ruins the story, or a different timeline and that ruins the story. I don't think you can. think a lot of people are ruining the story for themselves before they let the story actually completely be told. And granted, I'm going to admit that was one of those first ones. I mean, the only published thing I have so far on my my opinion of Final Fantasy VII Remake is my condemnation of them basically bringing all the mistakes from Final Fantasy 13 and doing it all over again. It wasn't until like I came across Sleep Easy and Schrodingersbabyseal and Ray Kaufman was I reintegrated into finding a new excitement over what these guys are going to bring us later on down the pipeline. So, like, yeah, I don't think that it's not. I don't think we're at that point where we can completely condemn what is happening. I think Sleep Easy had pretty much hit the nail on the head in today's stream earlier. You know, when he was talking about that he's just excited and he wants to see, you know, like that they took a risk and he wants to see if they could pull it off. And I'm excited to see it too.
They took a big risk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I agree so wholeheartedly to condemn. I'll use theater terminology here just because we are in intermission. To condemn the play after the first act without seeing any further act is just
exactly.
It just seems so.
Done in Wu-Tai?
It seems so short-sighted. I don't necessarily blame people for it, though. Western audiences
I got this.
For so many years now, have been brought up on the concept of a very centralized, complete narrative, beginning, middle, end, and that is it. You have the beginning, you have the middle, you have the end.
Trilogy.
Well, even before you would get something like a trilogy, or even before you would get something, well, I don't know, like even over the past 15 years having part 1 and part 2, right? Those ideas are establishing the concept that perhaps a story does not need to necessarily be told all in one sitting. So people Western audiences in particular, are so familiar with that model. It is difficult to sell different models, and we do not even need to go back too far into history, historically speaking, in order to find a time period in which people on a bi-monthly or tri-monthly basis would be running down to the local dock in order to see which new chapter of the novel they had been reading was finally stateside. Let's see, A Christmas Carol comes to mind. That Christmas Carol was not published in one volume. It was sent to the United States as it was being published effectively in chapters. And there was time in between. And we didn't have the whole story of Ebenezer Scrooge in one sitting. So whenever I think of something like Kingdom Hearts or now Remake, I'm thinking in that vein. It's not the whole story yet. There are going to be certain things that are brought up now that make absolutely no sense, and that's okay because there is a very strong possibility that they will make sense later. Not to say that every single thing will, but the overarching story will come to a conclusion. I will even call it a satisfying conclusion. Not in the sense that it will make everybody happy, but satisfying in so much as it will conclude. I really don't think the ending will be as open-ended or as ambiguous as people like to argue about the original being. Not this time around.
I loved the ambiguousness of the original ending. I think that's what people are, I'm going to use the word, afraid. And I'm going to use that word because I think that's what, when it was announced, that was what they were trying to, like they specifically said that. It might bring here. You know, that's how they announced the remake, right? But let's embrace whatever may come. It's like, so the entire time they were letting us know, like, hey,
better hurry.
It's not. We're gonna bring you something, and I think you're gonna like it, but just don't be afraid. And it was that too. And someone after playing Remake, and I had those feelings. Why didn't they just make a remake? Why did they call it Remake? Why didn't they just make it? And then someone brought me back like, they told you. They told you when they announced it. And I was like, fair.
You're gonna do what?
All right, let's see what you guys got.
it would be nigh impossible for anyone to embrace whatever comes if we all jump ship halfway before the end.
Right? Like if no one is around to support the development of this project, it will be unfinished, and it will feel like they did that job. So,
even from a literary perspective, if it stops partway through, or if people stop paying attention halfway through, there's no way to see the entire plan until we can back the entire plan, and that requires a completed story, whether the ending is just as ambiguous or not. So now I am looking forward to whatever the reunion brings, whether it is terror, whether it is a joy, or I'm trying to remember verbatim from the original 2015 trailer. No, I'm all in. I am so all in that I have very comparable feelings to your own. When I first saw the 2015 trailer, I was so excited. I was bouncing up and down in the chair I was in as though I were, a happy toddler, and I accidentally broke the chair. But I became very legitimately disheartened when it began to seem as though they were going to be different, not necessarily the one-to-one story that I had expected as well. And what ultimately brought me out of that mindset was the day I decided, in not so much on a whim, but it was a conclusion I came to, that I was going to wait until the game came out. The first part here. I was going to wait. I wasn't going to pre-order it. I wasn't going to experience it. I was going to give it time, maybe watch some other people play it, etc. And I'd make a decision on whether I liked it or not necessarily beforehand, or not necessarily being excited leading up to the release. And I'm not being facetious here, about 3 seconds later, I wanted to just slap myself, because I said to myself something very similar, very comparable to what I had said earlier this evening. This time is never going to come again.
Mm-hmm.
It might not necessarily be what I thought it was going to be, but whatever it's going to be, this is my favorite video game story of all time. How could I get to the point that I wanted to wait? And so a little bit of impulse spending then occurred, and I ended up buying the first class edition.
Me too. It's exactly what happened to me.
Oh, Baby Seal, please tell me that you are of a more rational mind than either of us, because Romagus and I are cut from the same cloth here. Not necessarily the best monetary decision, but also a fantastic monetary decision, because I have not regretted it for a single moment afterward. And
absolutely, yeah. I jumped on it too. And for the same reasons, like, well, I mean, at least I could be part of history if it's a colossal failure. I bought into something that was terrible, which I've done before. I've done before, and it won't be the last time I do it. But I was pleasantly surprised. The payoff was really good, really, really good.
Well, payoff in more than one way for you, Clark. I mean, here you are. Here we are.
Here we all are. Yeah.
Well, I went to E3 also, and I was one of the first people to play the demo, so I was a little bit more sold than I think a lot of people.
I think I remember.
Oh, that was another thing I was going to mention too.
I remember you telling that story.
Yeah.
Not only was there this build-up from the announcement back in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone thought that it was just going to be, but you got to take into account the time before 2015, right? Square Enix had been constantly talking about, hey, we've got a Final Fantasy VII project ready for you guys. And I think it was maybe 2012 or 2011 or something like that. They announced Final Fantasy VII Steam version for PlayStation 3. Right? And then so everyone was really excited that we were going to get a Final Fantasy VII remake, and we just got a re-release of the game that we've been playing for the last 17 years.
Was it that early, or was that also in 2015, but much earlier in 2015?
I think it was 2014.
I can't pin it down. Yeah, okay. I can't pin it down
2012
time-wise. But
okay, it was 2012.
Yeah, there was that feeling right? It's like, so because then when things started coming out about another Final Fantasy VII project, they're like, oh, what, you're gonna fucking release it on the Wii now? Who gives a shit, right?
Yeah.
And then instead of people not giving a shit, you had that CG opening, and then you had Remake.
Oh,
right?
I know.
And then people just lost their shit.
I know I know you're jesting, right? I know you're jesting, but I want you to consider something for one moment. City of the Ancients, Aerith kneeling before you, Cloud, Buster Sword above his head, and on a controller, no matter what you do, you have to press square. But can you imagine holding the old Wii, whatever they were called, the things in your hand, right?
Yeah.
No matter what you do, you don't want to swing that sword. You don't want to see Sephiroth descend. You want to save her from that fate. And no matter what you do, you have to press the button on the stick, because you can wave your arms until they fall off. It's still not going to happen. So I know you're jesting, but consider that for a second.
Yeah. Oh, so anyway, so you had the disappointment leading up to the announcement, and then you had the uproarious announcement, and then you had the 5 years or whatever in between.
My chair died for that announcement.
And then you got a demo that was basically a one-for-one remake. But everybody who played the demo was like, holy shit, this is everything that I ever fucking wanted. Here it is. And I cannot wait until next year, and I'm just gonna zone out. I'm gonna take days off of work, and I'm gonna just no-life this game. I remember a buddy of mine that I do a podcast with, his exact words is, I can't wait for tomorrow because I'm gonna no-life the fuck out of Final Fantasy VII. And he's one of the game's most staunch critics now, because of how he's a very story-focused person. And I was kind of in that camp when I first beat the game, but like I keep saying, it wasn't until Sleep Easy's Theory of 5, what was not Theory of 5? It's
The
Structure of 5. And I watched all of them. And I was like, okay, this guy he's more of a fan of Final Fantasy VII than I am. I thought I was a huge fan that knew all this stuff. And then he goes and makes this loveless Structure of 5, and I was like, because that sounds so great. And that's what got me re-excited about the Final Fantasy VII thing, even though I had felt jaded after it. And that's another thing why I wanted to mention to these creators in specific. I know sometimes you guys are like, I don't know why people are giving us money. And blah, blah, blah. I would give you money if I had it, right? Because you guys have given me value out of this game that the game couldn't. If you guys didn't exist, I would continue. I would be one of those vocal critics out there talking shit about it. Well, because you guys exist and you decided to share your opinion and what you found, you have given me a lot of content and to chew and think on, and for that I think you.
That means a lot. That's exactly what I want, and that I can't even tell you how much that means to me. You know, it is. It's. I was initially like, you know, I don't generally like, I'll just pause real quick to talk about this. I don't generally like having things spoiled, but through bizarre set of life circumstances, I kind of had Remake spoiled, not by the trailers, but like by early leaks, early unpacking of the script, and so I kind of like, I knew it was coming. And that helped temper my expectations so that when it actually was delivered, I was so in. And then I'd go on the internet, you know, and I'm like, I don't feel like anybody's getting this. Like this was a choice. You know, this is a brilliant choice. There's got to be somebody. Like, the reviews were good, but like fans were all like just grumbling. And then I saw Max Dude's reaction, and I was here for it because like I appreciated that he was supportive, but also at the same time I was like, yeah, but he's a little wrong, you know, like he's got some of the details wrong. And and so when Sleep Easy came into play, I immediately reached out to him like before his video hit, and that's how we kind of started a relationship. And it was just, it was good to have somebody else that was just like blown away by the mystery of it all, the exploration of everything. It was clear that, you know, like one of the interesting things having this script before you see the game is that you recognize how much storytelling is done just through the exposition of colors. Like, Nomura is such a visual storyteller that it just gave so much context to what they were trying to, you know, present to us. And so, like, the visual aspect of the storytelling was so intriguing and brought me so deep. I just wanted somebody else that felt that way. And then, as soon as we kind of teamed up, then the goal became, well, let's spread the great gospel. You know, like, let's make this a thing that other people see.
The great gospel.
You know?
Have you heard the word? The word is good.
I could see the angels coming down.
Well, I will echo what Ramagus stated earlier, at least in particular portions of it. The content creation has been an astronomically important element to me, but more so than that is simply finally having a place to speak about all of this.
Yeah.
To hear other people speak about all of this. I have waited years, I have waited decades at this point. Oh, hey, Blitz.
Blitz!
Yeah. Blitz, have you heard the good word? Have you heard the gospel? The great gospel? But I have waited decades. And yes, places existed, right? The livestream.net.com, .org, whatever it is these days, it existed. But I don't need to tell either of you, I suspect, how difficult it is to even today navigate the livestream. So having this type of medium through which to communicate, through which to have an opportunity to communicate and hear all these ideas and just meet other people, relatively speaking, who have that interests, who have the same interests as well, has been, I cannot articulate in words what it means.
I think you and me both are better at writing. Not saying that you're a bad speaker, because it sounds like you're a teacher, so you're probably a good teacher. But for me,
he teaches rhetoric, so yeah, that's not messing around at all.
Public, like, I'm not much of a public speaker, so it isn't until, like, I have to warm up. There's like a warm-up period before I can actually get the gears going. And when I get the gears going, I don't stop. I think you guys have probably witnessed that so far in my time here.
If you just want to hear something that's stupid, consider this. Recently, a colleague of mine asked me, he had an emergency he had to take care of. So without any context, he said, "I need you to go speak to my students. It's an hour and 25 minutes. You just tell them a little bit about King Arthur, right? Just talk about some Arthuriana. Just keep their attention." So, okay, 250 students, lecture hall class, no problem. I can handle that. Not a problem. No sweat whatsoever. I did not feel at all concerned. I could not bring myself to join the chat here on the Discord server first tonight because I was too nervous.
Every time!
I had to wait for you, and then you had to say something before I finally felt like I could.
Yeah. That happened to me last time when he opened up the chat.
Look, you guys have been pretty much the sole entertainment of this entire stream. Aren't you glad you joined?
This is what I was talking about earlier when I mentioned the punk frogs from the '87 cartoon. Because Toad Frog, because it exists here, if it is a reference, it is such a subtle, off-the-wall reference. Glorious.
You can get a picture of Sonon too.
Yeah,
I clipped this the last time
I haven't
you did
seen
it.
Sonon's frog form yet.
Here, let me get this one first. This is too good.
I clipped this the last time you did it. It's fantastic.
I saw that clip.
Yeah.
That was a good clip.
The laugh, Baby Seal. That was pure unbridled joy.
I was pretty happy.
You were.
Yeah, let's turn up that exposure. Mess around with photo mode. Okay.
Oh, I liked very much so. I liked the aesthetic of the Vice shot you took in that nice pale blue.
Oh yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I try.
But yeah, like I have this problem. I'll go into chat for a streamer, and I'll just type, and then I'll look at the chat log, and it's just 20 of things that I've said, and no one responding. it's like I'm reacting to what the streamer's typing, or what the streamer's doing, and I'm typing it all out. The chat. It feels like I'm talking to myself sometimes, but then ours comes in.
Yeah, you are speaking to a man who this is not embarrassing. I pride myself on this. It's not a point of pride. I just pride myself on it anyway. I enjoy typing out complete sentences, sometimes paragraphs through text messages, because the people I know who communicate with me will do the same thing. So I like reading all the different chat messages. So I like participating, which is finally a place to do that. Here and Sleep Easy in particular on his channel as well. So yeah, I like seeing the lengthy paragraphs. It only becomes difficult when you have about 7 to 10 people all doing it at the same time.
Yeah, a lot of my comments are like that. Like I just.
So just FYI,
I try to not monopolize.
So I am going to be heading into the Nero fight, and I will be taking a lot of shots during that. But once the actual ending starts, I'm going to switch, for the purpose of actually gaining footage, I'm going to switch the scene to a full screen, and I'm going to mute Discord audio. So the audience won't be able to hear you, but you guys still will be able to hear each other, and I'll be able to hear you.
All right, that's fine.
You've been having some unfortunate tech difficulties, either cat-related or otherwise, but do you just want us to hop out of the call just in case when that happens?
Nah, I can always redo it. I'd rather you stay.
All right,
thank you very much.
But yeah, today it's been the Rs and Remake show.
Right, yeah.
Yes, Schrodingersbabyseal playing Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate.
Yeah, he actually is here. We promise. This isn't just footage that we borrowed. He actually is here presently. Wave to the camera, Baby Seal. Prove that you're actually here. Oh wait, no, hold on. If this were a recording, I could have just said that. Never mind. There we go. I told him to wave. He did not do what I said. Perfect.
No, I'm pre-recorded, guys.
Yeah, it's all my deception. I said wave because I knew it would seem more credible if he did something. Yeah.
Deceptive Rs Omnia.
So I suppose. No, I'm not going to ask. Well, I'll ask. I just won't look for an answer now. What I was going to ask you, Baby Seal, is because you had said you had defeated Nero so handedly shortly thereafter your previous stream. I was curious what strategy you employed, but
it was
we're about to see it. So
well, no,
I was going to say those guards don't have blood. Those guards have purple smoke.
They have Genova smoke. Yeah.
Those guards are desiccated corpses. They're not coming back.
Yeah.
I figured out how to really just boost his. Sonon's got a ability that will pressure him so aggressively that it was kind of broken. That and just using the synergy combo, just makes the fight kind of like boringly easy.
Have you found Brumal form to be very effective here?
Yeah. I still actually haven't figured out how to like totally dodge.
Soul erosion,
but you can perfect deflect it.
Okay,
which I didn't know, and I wish I had.
My potential suggestion to you the other day was maybe that the final part could be dodged, and sometimes I think you may have done it. Other times I couldn't tell whether it was possible or not either. But Brumal form seems like it was built for that kind of thing.
Yeah, it does. Like I've tried to get at the exact moment, and it could just be me not ever hitting it, but. Yeah, this whole scene is so awesome.
Music, it's amazing.
Nero collects them, and then he takes them to a tea party and just speaks with them all the time. And stranger things have happened.
Definitely.
That's what I also think is really interesting is, at least here in the West, we always see life and death at odds. Or white and black at odds as opposites, but how they're represented here in Remake is that they're brothers. It's not father and son.
Yeah,
right? And it's not, they're not mortal enemies. but they're brothers, and it's the yin yang symbol.
And they're both assholes.
Right. It's not like one's good and one's bad. It's just one represents white and one represents black.
And as Blitz has so sagely pointed out, Nero is also a dog. Apparently, he has a bone in his mouth and everything.
Right, yeah.
He does.
I admit it is hard not to see it.
He is the personification of Stamp. Is what that is.
He is a humanoid version of the non-triangle I mentioned earlier.
So,
I'll never
go.
not see that bone now.
I'm not
Eagle
okay
Stamp,
with where
we've got
any
Terrier
of this is
Stamp,
going.
and we've got Nero Stamp. Third timeline.
Round.
The place where my brother and I like to play.
Now mine's moving aside.
Fantastic.
Let's take a different tack.
Wow, can't
And then those
believe
poor
it.
scientists. I really appreciate on a technical level how their entire containment plan is to cast the stop spell on Nero, something that he is immune to. Those scientists ultimately did not pay heed to their assessment area.
Yeah, scientists keep pulling the poor straw, like the short straw. I mean, even with Scarlet and Remake.
Oh, right.
As soon as things start going wrong, Scarlet's like, all right, Ottoman, let's get out of here. And then she locks the scientists in the explosion.
I mean, in her defense, scientists are a dime a dozen at Shinra, but a good piece of furniture is hard to come by. Right. So whether it's her chair or her ottoman, she wants to make certain they're protected.
Yes.
Although I think the chair in that one room, though, I'm pretty sure it's blown to Kingdom Come.
Well, and that's what I love about Yuffie and that scene. I love that you can sit in the chair. It's great. And she even crosses her legs and all that. Beautiful.
Yeah, the music, all three pieces for all three different sections of the fight, absolutely fantastic. Especially the third. It's definitely my favorite of the three. Baby Seal, Zila Fire wants to know what you are up to this evening.
Zila Fire, we are taking pictures. For one, I'm getting a bunch of picture stock, and Blitz knows why. It's for screenshots, for thumbnails, and because those can be hard to come by, and it's good to have 4K shots. So I'm just collecting as many photo mode photos that I can use high res filters on, and then put clickbaity titles on. And then also Phantom Valentine, who has made tremendous art for me and is just a rad dude overall, is also requested them.
Eyes.
Yeah. So
how far can you zoom in?
Sorry for interrupting, but Nero has those cat eyes.
Yeah, him and Genova only. They're the only character, or Sephiroth only, are the only characters in the compilation that have those eyes.
And Vice doesn't have those eyes.
Can you get a really, really nice close-up of his eye, or
so
can you not do that
cutscenes?
In the
cutscenes, you cannot change the angle.
Oh, that's a shame.
I know.
It's understandable, but it's a shame. The one thing about the photo mode that I have seen that I think legitimately disappoints me is that the zoom seems so limited. Yeah,
it is a little.
Photo mode streams our life, says Blitz.
I mean,
then if that's the case, then what is love?
That's a great question, and we'll let Blitz answer it, because he's responsible for it. Okay.
It's a rhetorical question. I already know the answer.
Well, I hear there's a rhetoric instructor in the chat.
Don't hurt me no more. That's the answer.
Oh, look at the time. It's 4:01 a.m. Time to go. So,
is it 4:01? Oh, you East Coast? Good lord.
Yes. I'm 3 hours ahead of you. So.
You're there with Blitz.
But I I have nothing to do today aside from ultimately be back in several hours for whatever Square Enix presents, so it's okay.
Oh my god, I forgot about that.
Hopefully we get some more.
Is that 4 hours, really?
No, you know what, I will double check what time that is, because everything is in PST these days, so I always need to translate it into EST for me. Let's see, Square Enix E3 2021, what time? I saw a lovely map, actually. Which I think that may have been something you retweeted on your Twitter page.
I'm sure I did. And Blitz probably did. Blitz will know. I mean,
he's still pondering the mysteries of what love is, so we won't hold him to two things at once. It'd be very cruel of us.
No, he has his answer. It's brutal for him.
Here we go. North America is 12:15 PDT. So a little over 8 hours yet. No, sorry, hold on, that would be my time. It's blast.
1 o'clock West Coast.
Yeah, so that's so a few more hours than that. So still plenty of time to take a wee nap. I really appreciate just how many ways the developers found to include the word darkness or some variation of the word darkness in English or in some other language, right? Tenebris, right?
Table.
Get the Latin in there.
Yeah.
There's so many. All of his attacks, well, not all of them, most of them have that element to them, something dark.
Okay. It looks like there's just like body parts on the ground on the other side of that barrier. Like, that looks like...
Are you looking?
I can't zoom in enough to really see. Yeah, that's just a boot.
There's a helmet somewhere.
Yeah, there's definitely a helmet. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't damage you because of your cutscene armor.
Yeah.
As much as I'd like to think that there would be an alternative in future installments to that issue, I feel as though it's too integral to the battle system at this point, because Remake would have to be re-released, the first part would have to be re-released again if something were going to change. Otherwise, it would just be too potentially jarring, especially on that day far off into the future when everything is released as a set.
Okay, so I am going to mute you guys for the chat skis. And
no.
There we go. I won't be able to hear you. I'm not even sure you can hear me. Probably not. So they're muted, and we're gonna go full screen. All right. Ooh, that's a good native one.
Don't want to spoil the moment, but we should probably get going.
But I'm so tired.
I could carry you.
You win. Sheesh. Aha! Hey, what's in here? Someone? No,
Please.
Sona.
Yuffie. You gotta keep going. For us.
No. Stop it. Don't think I can do this alone. The amazing Yuffie wants you! Join her team and the sky's the limit!
Hey, Barrett? Were you really walking the whole way?
Yep.
Column's still pretty far, though, isn't it?
Another full day, give or take.
Question. When my mom says a full day, she means from the time you get up in the morning till the time you go to bed. But for me, it means from the time you get up in the morning, all the way through till the time you get up the next morning. So, which is it for you?
Gotta go with Elmira on that one.
That's a relief.
Is it, though?
Cloud, bet you've had to hoof it from sunup to sundown tons of times. This is all just same old, right?
That's right. But even so, we're all gonna need to stop and rest. Especially you.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, marching into the unknown ain't easy. But don't worry, because I'm here to lead the way.
That's comforting.
Of course it is! All right, everyone, let's stop here for a minute. Leader's orders. Now breathe in that fresh air. Oh. Actually, scratch that. Let's, save it for later, when we're not so close to Midgard.
Guess this is goodbye, City of Mako.
Like this?
Yep, just like that.
Cool.
No way! A car!
Hey, stop! What is it with these damn birds?
Sorry about that.
No need to apologize, ma'am.
Look at that. Where's a roof when you need one?
Gonna be okay?
Should be, but weird. My stomach's in knots.
That's its way of telling you it's hungry. Let's move.
It's been a while, huh? Long time no see. How you been? Listen. Hey. I'm back! Aerith?
Is lost. However, a great deal of what has gone into this storytelling, and this is one of the reasons I was originally drawn to Sleep Easy and Baby Seal as well, is just the objective way they can look at the compilation. Hello.
Hey, Clark.
And ultimately discuss those things.
Indeed. For me, what I've noticed is that's the postmodern aspect of the game that I feel like I'm having to fulfill on my end as the consumer. I think there are a lot of consumers of content out there that take no responsibility for their feelings of how they feel about a subject. They every bad feeling they